You know, my spookies, New Year's Eve is a funny night. Everybody's dressed up. Everybody's counting down. Everybody's pretending the clock can magically wipe the slate clean. But midnight doesn't erase anything. Midnight just gives the darkness a fresh calendar to work with. So tonight we're doing this the right way. A full New Year's Eve horror marathon. 6 stories, one right after the other, like a champagne-fueled countdown where every pop is another door opening somewhere it shouldn't. We've got Times Square packed shoulder to shoulder with strangers, and one of them is hunting for the perfect midnight tradition. We've got a once-a-year reckoning that brings a man back just long enough to settle the score. We've got a Brew Year's Eve party that turns a historic hotel into a trap. We've got a grimy late-night theater where the feature presentation might wake up something ancient. We've got punk rock, snow, and a road trip that goes so wrong it shouldn't even be possible. And finally, we've got a federal paranormal badass trying to keep New Year's Eve from becoming a welcome party for something that should never arrive. So, top off your drinks, check your locks, make sure you're subscribed, and if the fireworks outside sound more like footsteps, well, keep on listening.
Even the Devil Tells the Truth, Sometimes, by Dan Wilder, a WeeklySpooky original.
The first couple of years, I just went for hookers. I figured no one would go looking for those broads anytime soon. It was simple. While everyone was staring at that big, stupid ball like a bunch of deer in headlights, I'd find my gal, taking her down an alley and doing them up proper. A happy New Year's for me. In theory, anyway. The problem is, those bitches looked like they were relieved. And why wouldn't they be? The knife was just another long, hard object painfully crammed inside them. But this one brought an end to their filthy existence. Christ, it was so hard to get excited over that work, but I did my best. Damn, I've gotten ahead of myself again. I suppose you want to know what makes me tick, huh? Well, go fuck yourself. Just messing with you. What do you want to know? My parents were real pieces of work. My dad drank his life away in every pisshole bar down by the docks, and my mom sold ass in the same. I was unplanned, unwanted, and never made to forget it. Except, none of that hard luck garbage is true. I grew up in a nice suburb. Mom was a teacher and homemaker. Dad was an accountant. The biggest threat to my childhood was the fact that I was spoiled rotten. Or as spoiled as a middle-class brat can be. So, what made me turn bad? I have no idea. See, back around 76 or so, beating the shit out of strangers for no reason was how I got my kicks. But little did I know, this was gonna be the mozzarella stick platter before the eggplant parm that is my career these days. Let me tell you. Anyway, I'd pulped this cat down Chinatown way, dig, looking for any ill-gotten gains I could grab. I found some sort of amulet in his left pocket. Older than my Aunt Petunia and expensive, too. At least I hoped it would be when I went to pawn it. But that would have to wait, though, because beating the shit out of a man is hungry work, and my stomach, it was growling something fierce. 30 minutes later, I was kicked back in my easy chair in my rat trap of an apartment, hamburger grease mixed with thin blood from that rare patty dripping down my arm. That's when I remembered my spoils. I reached into my pants pocket and brought out that glittering trinket, now covered with slop from my chow. That's when that bauble went shiny and hit me with some sort of mumbo-jumbo magic that sent me sprawling across the floor. Things went black for a hot second, but when I came to, he was just sitting there on top of the giant zenith. Well, I say he, but in truth it may have been a she, or a human-shaped lump of clam dip, because no matter how hard I stared at this thing, I could never get a clear look at it. But I could tell it was dressed to the nines, and always smiling. "What's so funny, pal?" I asked. That's when the fucker talked directly to my brain. And while I can tell you what it said wasn't in any language I'd ever heard, I understood every damn word. The bit about immortality, the murder biz that would seal the bargain, one ex-woman every midnight on New Year's Eve. Hell, the son of a bitch even had a big contract for me to sign, like something out of a goddamn comic book. And naturally, that pen was filled, you guessed it, with blood. Too much, right? So, yada yada, Lucifer, hookers, and blood. And here we are, New Year's Eve, 1979. And it's time for a change. But since not a lot of you clowns are familiar with my work, let me take you through my 9 to 5 if you can pick up what I'm laying down. I wake up around noonish. See, I set my own hours, so I can sleep in. A real job perk, if you ask me. So yeah, shit, shower, shave, fry up an egg, maybe 2 for breakfast, orange juice and vodka. Then on with the day's business. I cruise the streets, and it is cold as a witch's tit out here. But this involves my work the 364 days it isn't December 31st. I just kind of walk around with a heart on and get as much attention from the leather boys and hustlers as I can, marking in my mind who is where and when. See, the devil is in the details. Then I take in a porno flick or two, grab a dog or a slice, then make my way back through the spank bank of earlier. I go for the toughest, strongest looking laddie I can find. Then I punch and kick the ever-loving shit out of them, rob them, and maybe do the same to any tourist unfortunate enough to cross my path. And then it's off for a cup of joe. What? The hooker thing only applies to the killing, and I only do that to the ladies once a year to honor that bargain. The rest of the year, they just ain't my bag. Here's the rub. I don't really give a rat's puckered pink asshole about the living forever thing. Who needs that static? No, I'm just thankful that someone put the notion of killing a woman into my thick skull. Most of the time, I don't think about dames at all unless they're up on that stained silver screen. Plus, it inspired me to up my game in the whole inflicting pain on my fellow man game that I've been so fond of. Practice makes perfect and all that. Besides, who knows if that shit would still apply anyway? I hawked that amulet the next day for $200 and a sixer of bud. Where the fuck was I? My day. All day, every day. So I head home, take a shower, believe it or not, maybe throw in a TV dinner, catch some tube. You know what really tickles my asshole with a feather? Grabbing a paper and seeing if anyone reports on the shit I do. Hey, what can I say? I'm kinda like a gutter narcissist. Hey, I went to high school just like everybody else. Anyway, those rags never say a peep about me or the meat I, tenderize. Probably never will either. Fuck 'em. Nighttime? More of the same, really. I work 2 shifts a day, 7 days a week, and that's dedication no one can match. And I don't even have a union or nothing. Now that's January 1st to December 30th. But that next day, that's where the shit gets serious. I take a little personal time for the most of the day, do a bump, maybe rub a few out, grab a nice steak from Sizzler for lunch. Real self-care type shit, you dig? Now, most years, I would just hang out on the fringes of Times Square looking for my mark, but as I said, this year was going to be a big one. So, after Sizzler, I got a haircut. Just gotta look good for this. I yank a magazine off the newsstand and tear out a sample of cologne. I wasn't kidding around here, folks. Believe you me, class all the way. Anyway, I get to Times Square early, and the one thing you out-of-towners watching from your big, comfy couches probably don't realize, motherfuckers line up for this thing hours and hours before anything is even going on. Just standing in the cold, hard street milling around like fucking zombies or something. I kick around for a bit, taking a drag on a marb here and there. As I look around, I have to admit there are some spectacular candidates out there. Much better than the ridden hard and put away wet flotsam and jetsam of the last few years. A strawberry blonde with gigantic tits and braces that catch the now setting sun when she flashes big smiles at her friend. An equally attractive Spanish chick with the blackest hair I have ever seen. You can bet those two are on my shit list for sure. But they just ain't the one. I continue my search. I see a cute Chinese girl here, a sexy socialite there. All big ticket scores for sure, but again, I gotta feel this one in my balls. Then it hit me. Fuck, it's cold out here. I need a coffee. And as fate, if you believe in such bullshit, would have it, there was a donut shop directly across from me. I went in, ordered a cup, and took a load off for a tick. Now, I don't believe in fate. But then again, before a few years ago, I never thought His Infernal Majesty would be sitting atop my boob tube pulling the old Faust gag. So, here we are. Anyway, out of the ladies' room, she came, looking for all the world like an angel in the flesh. Well, little angel, tonight's the night you get your wings clipped. I watched her go up to the counter and order. The way she moved, I could tell she was athletic, but there was more. Was she a ballerina? A gymnast? Damned if I know, but she definitely took care of herself. That's for sure. Her hair was like spun gold. I liked that. It would show the blood better once I did the devil's business. Literally. Anyway, she paid, walked out, and I followed her close. But not close enough to look obvious, dig? Yeah, so she snaked back through the crowds, the steam from her coffee trailing behind her, which was leaving a nice trail for me to follow, like that dude going through the Minotaur's maze. Damn, she was with someone. That would complicate things, but nothing I can't handle. Just have to think about how to get her away from that bozo she's with. That's when fortune smiled upon me for the second time that night. There was that fool with his clipboard, and you know he was just on a power trip like no other. Just wandering the crowd, looking for the most photogenic folks he could find and moving them right in line with the unblinking camera eye that would beam this bullshit into homes nationwide. He'd be easy. I dealt with dudes his size every ding-dong freaking day. Hey, buddy, you know that big shot producer running this thing? I noticed the lanyard around the hotshot's neck. Damn it! Now where did my lanyard go? I really played up looking for it, too. Oscar material here for sure. You mean Jim? Yeah, Jim. He wants to talk to your ass pronto. Shit. Probably wants me to get him a coffee. Can't he see I'm trying to make this show special? I mean, look at the prime trim I've picked out. What was your name again? Bill. I lied. First year working the show? The fool was actually buying this crap. Yeah. Does it show? I pointed to where the lanyard should be and chuckled. You'll be fine. Now, where was Jim? This way. Follow me. I know a shortcut that'll take us right past this mess. The people were becoming packed in like sardines. The rube followed me like a lemming, right into the alley where I smashed his fucking head in against the ice-covered bricks so many times the walls started to steam from the sprays of his hot blood that splashed on it again and again. I grabbed that clown's clipboard and lanyard, and I made my way back to where I saw my angel last. And there she was, just where I left her. Time to get the show on the road. Excuse me, miss. Yes? Pretty and shy, too. Jackpot. How would you like to come up front and watch the show? I work for the network. I pointed to the lanyard for emphasis. Oh, I don't know. Then her man actually became an accomplice in her pending murder. You have to. You'll be on TV. But can he come? Sorry, producers want ladies only. I don't know. No sweat, doll. I'll ask somebody else. I turned to walk away, like really playing it broad. Come on, Miranda. You have to go. This is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. You don't mind? No, we'll just meet here after the ball drops. Okay. I extended my arm, and she took it with a slightly trembling hand. I led her on and on, a few twists here, a few turns there, and before you know it, we arrive at 1 Times Square. And that's where things started to go south, for yours cruelly. As I brought her closer, old Miranda got more and more nervous, and by the time I showed her my long, hard blade, she'd bolted straight for the foyer of that famous edifice without any hesitation. Motherfucking track and field. I should have sussed that out. Too cocky, old man, I thought, as I played wolf to her scared rabbit and gave pursuit. She'd already roused the half-asleep rent-a-cop that now leaped in my path. I flashed him my badge and mumbled something about some teenager who'd mooned the network's cameras, and the dumb bastard, he let me pass without any hesitation. I saw a quick flash of the rabbit as she bolted up the stairway and out of sight. Fuck that noise. I was elevator bound. I stopped the car a few floors up. As the door slid open, I could see only the back of her shoes as she ascended even higher. It did hit me at some point that if she bothered to notice I was on the elevator and not running up those damn steps behind her, that she simply had to go back down the stairs as I continued going up like a prize-winning dumbass. Oh well, here's to fear making folks make horrible decisions. My ace in the hole. The elevator hit the top floor. The door hissed open, and my little bunny was nowhere to be found. Now what in the hell is this crap? I stuck my head out the elevator, and whap! A kick right across the chops. Fucking karate too. This kid was full of surprises, that was for sure. Damn, she knocked me right on my ass. Slowly I stood and shook my head, trying to get those damn spots and stars from swirling around in the air. That's when the breeze hit me, cold as a witch's tit and 10 times as hard. The roof. The bitch had gone out onto the roof. With my wits about me once more, I bolted into the hall and immediately saw the roof access door wide open. Oh well, I wanted something to spice things up, and I guess I got my wish. That's for sure. But goddamn if those sullen-eyed whores didn't look real good right about now, let me tell you. I emerged onto the roof and immediately got stung by the biting cold. I need to get this shit over and get my ass home. Maybe, throw a Hungry Man in the oven and sip a beer or 10 as the late show unspools on WPIX. That's when I saw her, leaning against the framework of the tower that would soon send that glittering ball that illuminated her porcelain puss skyward. I wasted no time and charged toward her like a freight train. Her eyes grew wide and she shimmied up that tower like greased lightning. Fine, if that's what it takes, I'm game. As we made it to the top, I swear to you, the crowd below gasped in unison. What would Mr. and Mrs. America say at home? Whatever. Screw those tamed monkeys. This year we're going off script for the ultimate act of performance art. And this girlie's body, it's gonna be my canvas. Finally, we made it to the top, and my quarry decided it was time to engage me in fisticuffs hundreds of feet above old Manhattan town. A well-landed punch here, a slice and dice there, and we were almost on equal footing until that damn ball lifted off and began heading our way. On and on we battled until that freaking ball was at our feet. And that is when I put my faith in Satan, grabbed that girl by the throat, and kicked off that tower with superhuman force. I swear to you, it seemed like we fell forever, intertwined as lovers. And let me tell you, this climax, it was gonna be a gusher. And then all went black with a moist splat as a soundtrack. I flashed in and out of consciousness, but I shit you not, someone actually said it was beauty that killed the beast. Like hell it was. I threw us off that tower. Then all went black as midnight for what seemed like forever. Then I heard a drum growing louder and louder. Turns out it wasn't a drum, but something a little more personal. I gasped as I woke up in the city morgue. And as I swung myself off the cold steel table on which I lay, I thought, Prince of Lies, my ass. Now, where are my clothes? Satan's Shotgun by Daniel Wilder. I had a revelation come New Year's Eve of 1899. Jesus ain't nothing. I reckon I could resurrect myself like a right heavyweight champion. Long as my boy's bones held out, that is. But admittedly, I couldn't hold a candle to that water to rot gut routine, and I sure as fuck couldn't walk on water, and there sure as shit ain't any virgins in my vicinity. I guess I truly meant that coming back from the dead wasn't any great shakes. What brought me to that bit o' revelation were the events of nearly 12 years prior. 1887, if you can cipher. The night Gideon Pharaoh's Nightmare Zodiac Death Gang came a-knockin'. And that's exactly as those hocus-pocus braggarts build themselves, too. Nightmare Zodiac Death Gang should have spent more time practicing with pistols than coming up with candy-ass gang titles. But I digress. You see, I was a simple man then, farming, maybe a bit of trapping, not to mention interpreting for the local tribes and those they cottoned to trade with. It wasn't the high life, but it was good enough for me, Elizabeth, and our boy Lazarus. That name was a bit of a on-the-nose serendipity that the fates served up to us by and the by. Let me tell you true, and I sure as hell wasn't amused. 'Tweren't 18 months after our boy's birth that the sack-headed sidewinder Gideon and his posse arrived on our doorstep and ended his life. And his mama's. But as was their folly, they never checked if my heart had stopped. And to be fair, I never asked them why they were so sore with me and mine. So yeah, mistakes were made all around on that day. So once their devilish deeds were done, they headed off into the still night with nary a thought of the hell they had borne that day. And still my heart continued to beat like a native drum, a doom dirge banging away to attract any midnight motherfucker within 666 yards. And to track, it surely did. The shaman entered what remained of our home, casual as can be. The fully bandaged man he led on a leash followed, seemingly devoid of thought, as well as grace. He slinked his way over to me like a mongoose, all sinew and glide, the bones around his waist clanking together like the gnashing teeth of some desert devil risen from an unholy hell, ready to feast. As my eyes strained to focus, I saw that bastard light a fire of green flame, a flame he used to rend the prone form of my boy to ashes and bone in as much time as it takes to tell. I admit the darkness took me then, as I was a powerful sight weaker in constitution than I am now. Though I have a dread vision of that bandaged fella placing a lipless mouth over my own and blowing a dust that reeked to high hell of rot deep into my lungs that made them feel as if they was filled with the fire of old Scratch himself. I came to walking along a trail deep in the nearby Adirondacks, a foul-scented wrapping from the shaman's friend tied tightly around my eyes. While you may get to thinking that would seriously impede my journey, the exact opposite held true. I could sense where I was going, and just where the first of those I sought were hunkered down. So onward I trekked, my boy's bones rattling in the leather sack strapped to my left shoulder. That same rattle let any man or beast in my path know that I surely was not to be fucked with as I began my stride along revenge's rough road. I walked those wicked woods until the sun fell low and the sky was streaked in hues of lavender and rose, and it was then I came upon the cabin, on New Year's Eve, painted as it were in two differing colors, sky blue and soft pink, the abode of Gemini, 2 doses of poison in 1 pill. The smoke that poured from the chimney let me know those that needed correcting were home sweet home. I didn't stand on formality. The door exploded inward from the impact of my left shit kicker, splinters spreading out like buckshot acting as my calling card. It took me a fraction of a second to realize no one was visible in the room, magic eyewear or no, but I could smell them just fine. Naturally, they didn't surprise me none when they exploded from the shadows of the cabin's ceiling. However, the fact that they could move together like a great spider in their conjoined state definitely raised an eyebrow. I unloaded my rifle with a thunderous roar. The shot tore a nice chunk of whatever the lady side of this thing was called, but she wasn't going down by a long shot. Before I knew it, the male side of the equation had maneuvered himself in such a way that he both knocked me to the ground and managed to wrap the fleshy band that kept these two eternally bound around my neck. That same bit of flesh began flexing and throbbing until I couldn't draw a breath, the various veins and sinew contained under that warm sleeve pulsing like a bag of snakes. Things began swirling and growing ever darker. That's when I died, for the first time. The shaman appeared shortly thereafter, though my enemies never noticed. Although, if they did, I wager they'd have been confused as all get out. See, that fella simply strolled in, leaned low, and whispered in my ear. Use a bone? I didn't quite gather what he was on about, but it seemed like a question I should answer in the affirmative. He reached into my rucksack, pulled out one of the 12 bones of my boy that clattered inside, and shoved that rune-covered ivory femur right in my mouth. It dissolved on contact with my tongue, and I was back in business. I sat up, puked, and roared at my killers who had now sat down to a nice warm meal after their deed was done. What I did next would become a bit of a legend. See, I grabbed the steak knife out of the hand of the twin closest to me, who honestly didn't even resist, probably the shock of a corpse interrupting his din-din. Anyway, I took that blade and commenced to slice that ribbon that held them together like a rabid wolf. But then I had a pang of conscience. These two had been together since day one, so it'd be a shame to take that away from them. Fortunately, I learned to sew at a tender age. I can only imagine the look on Gideon's face when he saw one or two, not sure how they counted themselves. Anyway, saw a member of his posse fixed mouth to crotch of their opposite number like those yin-yang symbols the Chinese fellas out west were so fond of. And imagine it would have to be, as once my work was done, I sunk into the earth outside the Gemini's doorstep, and there I slept for a full year. And so it went. At the very end of each and every year, I'd rise up and put a murder on one of those psychos. Pisces, hard to breathe with concrete in your gills. Taurus, let's just say he wasn't just a bull from the shoulders up, but that would be his undoing when I rammed that tallywhacker straight down his throat. Aries, Leo, Cancer, Sagittarius, Virgo, Libra, Capricorn, Aquarius, dead, 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 and double dead. Don't ask. Year after year I fought, and year after year I lost a little bit more of my boy. Piece by piece. Finally, I came to Scorpio. And if you think the other menagerie made for a one-of-a-kind corpse gallery, I can assure you all that that final member of that gang, minus their ringmaster, but I'll get to his arcane ass in a tick. See, after the decade and change of carnival exhibits I'd tussled with, I wouldn't blame you none if you wagered Scorpio would be some kind of insect man, but it wasn't. Hell, it wasn't even a man. As you could guess from the hiring of those darling siblings I jawed about earlier, Gideon didn't give a single shit if those that worked for him were men or women, a real rarity as far as evil posses went in the late 1800s. Of course, half those motherfuckers would be a right challenge to even classify as human. When I sauntered up to that gypsy wagon Lady Scorpio called home, I could just tell I was in for a hell of a time. The scent of burning herbs filled the air, and the roaring flame burning brightly beside the gaudy wagon was doing a solid job of roasting a large pheasant. I hunkered down by the fire. It always feels good to warm my hands after pointing my boots toward the sky for 12 months. The lavender and crimson curtains that covered the entrance to the wagon parted, and she appeared, a raven-haired beauty with eyes as cruel and cold then as a whole nest of vipers could possess. I told Gideon doing your wife and boy was a grave mistake. Well, it's a mistake that will surely put you in your grave, missy. She laughed, and I had to admit it was an unbelievably delicate thing. If that is to be my fate, there is little I can do to change it. I spit at her feet. Yup. Won't you come inside a moment? It's your funeral, you can have it any way you want. I entered the wagon and beheld the interior, which contained nothing save for an opulent bed. I sat down and waited for the show to start. She slid into the bed beside me, pushed me down, and started to rub up against me all feline-like. I grabbed her hair, tugged it hard, and whispered the most romantic thing I could think of into her ear. This is for Lisbeth. I drove the blade of the hunting knife through the back of her head before she could even realize I had pulled it from my left boot. She made that weird gargle whistling exhale thing that you never really got used to. Then the light in those big brown eyes went dim. Should have started with this one. I managed to remove my knife from her skull and kick her ass right out of the wagon in a near seamless movement. I heard her hit the ground and then... splash? Her skin flew through the curtains and collided with the far wall of the wagon with a sickening sound akin to pig innards being thrown at a whorehouse. Ah, here we go, I said as the giant scorpion clickety-clacked through the entryway. The odd thing about this here scorpion is it had a great set of breasts and a tail equipped with a rather ornery-looking cock where the poisonous sting should have rested. I'm going to fuck you one way or another, lover. The beast spat from a mouth full of spear-like teeth and bad intentions. Get in line, sister. I drew my iron and unloaded on that nightmare with barrel ablazing. That damn tail whipped at me again and again as Scorpio's face looked like a vat of prize-winning chili, and to my horror, the loads that appended shot were some sort of vile acid. While the walls of the wagon began to dissolve, the bitch stopped her bucking. Well, fuck me silly. I didn't die this go-around. I wonder if I'll still take a dirt nap. Yep, I said, as I folded into the cold earth. For the first time in years, I dreamed. I saw my family. The unspeakable terror life had become, the soul-crushing scream into the abyss I'd make year after year as I was reborn to put down one monster after another. And I saw that burlap-headed bastard that had made this all so. And I saw children. Unfamiliar children with their faces tinted a glowing blue, the exact same hue of which I'd never seen the like of before. Guess what day it is? That's right, the day I end the life of that masked son of a bitch and finally rest in peace. That's the theory anyway. The morning of New Year's Eve, 1899. I had that Jesus thought I mentioned at the start of this yarn, and I found myself wandering the streets of old Manhattan town, beastly bandages in place. Everything was cold gray, until I got that unholy vision that Gideon was well and truly a man about town, though he wore a false human face over his rough mask. I followed him around a pace, but he seemed to make stops at random, and although he made no indication that he knew I was there, I knew damn well he did. Finally, he got the drop on me after a rather well-executed disappearing act in the Bowery. Let's retire to my residence and talk this through, eh, dead man? He purred. Yup, I answered. We entered the luxurious townhouse Gideon called home. Please relax, Gideon said, gesturing to an array of sofas and chairs that festooned his abode. I took a load off on a nearby Persian rug. That furniture was doubtless cursed and would spell my doom if I dare put my ass upon it. Are you a gambling man? He asked. Not by nature, no. I am, and if I had to play my hand, I would wager you want to know why I chose you and your kin to slaughter. The thought had crossed my mind a time or two. If I'm to be honest, I answered true. I had heard that if you do someone a cosmic-level injustice, like a random killing for instance, then powerful magic is revealed to those willing to travel a dark path. You heard rightly. He gestured toward my rucksack. The magic? My son. Your son became the rarest of magics? You should be kissing my feet for this gift. I see it a tad different. I wager you do. Nevertheless, my theory was correct. Nevertheless, you should have listened to your pet bug. Scorpio? She was always the most in tune of my menagerie. Was is the operative word. I care little that you killed any of those sideshow attractions. You're all heart. No, I'm all business. How so? I queried. Let's say you give me that last bone in your sack, and I let you walk out of here and live a long and happy life. Let's say I do. What does that give me? An eternity without those I love? Those you took from me? True, but a life is a life. I thought on this a spell. And I had me a revelation. Hold on, you'll see. Fine. You want the bone? Here it is. I removed my son's skull from the sack and held it up for that snake to see. Glorious. Please, let me hold it. The shaman spoke into my ear for the last time. I nodded. I tossed my boy's skull to Gideon, and as that bone grew ever closer, I drew my pistol and fired. The skull exploded when the bullet hit the bone. The shaman laughed. His Egyptian pal laughed. I laughed. Gideon, however, did most assuredly not laugh. The shards of the skull became missiles and pierced Gideon's mask in 100 razor-sharp volleys. He did that gargle thing and fell like a sack of potatoes. That's that, then, I said. I waited for some sort of cosmic redemption. Would I stand before my family once more? Would I finally be able to rest? A glowing letter A appeared in the sky. A glowing S followed it. And another S. Ass. Real cute, I thought, as I finally succumbed to the darkness. Brent laughed. Ass. Classic. Yeah, man, this game is so easy if you have enough quarters, Todd said. I've beaten it like 100 times. The duo walked away from the cabinet as the attract screen of Satan's shotgun called out to the next player, and Elizabeth and Lazarus died anew. A Few Cold Ones by David O'Hanlon. The man stood alone in the parking lot, watching a chip bag roll like a tumbleweed across the asphalt. The abandoned Kmart no longer held any of its corporate branding. The moss and mildew-speckled bricks were covered in graffiti, and the windows glazed over with years of grime. The man pulled his gown up in a bunch and aimed at the graffiti, relieving himself between a proclamation of love and a smiley face. The stream slapped against the brickwork and splattered the toes of his filthy hospital slippers. He groaned. He needed to get real clothes if he was going to enjoy his self-awarded release from the Cerletti Institute. Kmart had always been his favorite store. The long shifts at the poultry plant sapped most of the joy from his life. Then he discovered this particular store. Every Sunday, he set the tone for the week by coming in to get all his essentials, enjoy the hospitality, and visit with the employees. Especially Diane. He scratched at the fat scar between the silver waves of hair. He would never forget his first love. He was sure she hadn't forgotten him. He'd see if he could find her once he got himself together. Whispers from inside snapped his mind back to the present and curled his lips in a malevolent smile that spread like a tearing wound. He leaned his face close to a fist-size hole in the window. Nothing was stirring between the leftover shelves and racks. A camera flash lit a corner of the store. The sudden illumination left dots flickering in his vision, but, for the briefest moment, he saw the two urban explorers reflected in a spider-webbed mirror. He covered his mouth to hide his giggling. Kmart was still the best place to do his shopping. Brew Year's Eve is about more than just busty beer wenches and dollar pints, Darren said with a swing of his arm that splashed beer from his glass and onto his shoes. It's about the resilience of the American people in the face of puritanical religious fervor. Maggie Mills rolled her eyes. It's about getting drunk off your ass at the Florida-Georgia line and belching your ABCs with the other Neanderthals. I can make it all the way to O, Darren chortled. Brew Year's Eve was Oklahoma's largest beer festival. Its exponential growth and one-of-a-kind setting attracted beer connoisseurs from across the country. 3,000 attendees meandered the grounds of the Old Springer Hotel. Short bursts of fireworks detonated overhead every hour in a countdown to the new year. Local bands cycled on and off the grand stage to the east of the building to get the crowd fired up for the headliners. How Love Rocket was still riding the success of their 1986 hit, Sweet Cream, was anyone's guess, but their appearance added another $50 to the already steep admission price. Vendor tents lined the manicured western yard with an assortment of wares that rivaled most malls. On the south lawn, partygoers gambled on carnival games for a chance to win cash and prizes. The northern sprawl directly in front of the hotel was a smoky haze of mingling scents from the rows of food trucks. And between them and the entrance, the hotel's ornate fountain featured Poseidon, rising from a tower of lager-spewing sea life with his trident thrusting into the sky beneath the watchful eye of stained glass rose windows 6 stories overhead. 200 scantily clad serving girls gracefully prowled through the sea of people with trays of beer and then quickly sprinted back to the dressing room to empty the tips from their halter tops before making another round. Look around you, Maggie. This is historical. Darren spread his arms wide at the backdrop of the once lavish hotel. A vinyl banner fluttered in the chill breeze over its doors. Happy Brew Year from OK Brewing. The name's OK, but the beer is legendary. Darren's right, for once. Maggie's boyfriend Carlton put an arm around her waist. These guys did something really amazing here. Is that so? Maggie held his chin in place as one of the wenches bounced past them. And what could be more amazing than all this cleavage and cheap beer? Maggie's best friend and Darren's girlfriend, Karen, giggled. We're in the Springer Hotel, Darren said matter-of-factly. Maggie shrugged. And? Carlton held up a finger. How about I show you? The other 3 followed him through the crowd. They rounded the beer fountain and went to the main entrance where Carlton slapped the brickwork. A series of pockmarks dotted the facade beside a bronze plaque emblazoned with the name. Carlton pointed to the food vendors. On this night, in 1931, 60 Prohibition agents led by Two Gun Hart pulled up where those trucks are now, he said. The Springer Hotel refused to acknowledge Prohibition. Everyone knew it, but no one wanted to risk the wrath of Farrell Springer. But Hart was Al Capone's big brother, Darren interrupted. and brass balls are genetic. So, what happened? Karen moved closer to hear over the crowd. Farrell stepped out the front door and shouted, "If you're coming in, it's drinks for $1 or lead for free." Carlton whipped his hand up with his fingers making a gun, and then he fired a single shot, taking the hat right off Hart's head. Maggie poked a finger into a bullet hole, and they returned fire. "Boy, did they," Darren said. "The barrage killed Farrell and 3 bystanders in the lobby. The guests started pulling guns and the hotel became a battleground." Carlton jerked his head to the door and they continued inside. 9 people died in the shootout and a store of moonshine caught fire, killing 6 more and destroying the West Wing. "It was the largest mass killing in the history of Carpenter County," Darren added. "Barely. Otis Kilgore's Christmas party only missed the mark by 1, Carlton said with a snicker. He snapped his fingers and smiled wide. "Did you hear? Netflix is doing a movie about Otis. I hope they get Kevin Smith to play him." Carlton laughed. "That'd be a riot." "My babysitter used to tell me Otis would come and get me if I didn't listen to her," Karen mused. "Who tells a 6-year-old that?" "Most of the babysitters in Ottawa," Darren shrugged. Maggie sneered and nodded in agreement, remembering her own sitter's warnings. The couples made their way through the lobby and up the wide staircase between its hand-carved rails. In '93, OK bought the hotel and started restoring it for their headquarters as a slap in the face to the Prohibition days. The top 2 floors make up their offices, and they built their brewing facility on the ruins of the West Wing. Carlton laughed. "You can't tell me that's not the coolest story in the world." Maggie leaned on the banister and watched the crowd in the lobby. "What about the other 3 floors?" "Haunted as shit." Darren chugged the rest of his beer and whistled for a server. "Yep," Carlton added. "They renovated the rooms and rent them out as a tourist attraction. Everyone that's ever stayed here claims they saw weird things." Maggie lifted the festival pass hanging from the lanyard around her neck with a room key. "And we're spending the night with the ghosts and the drunks? What could go wrong?" A maniacal, shrill guffaw answered, and Carlton spun in a start. His hand swiped the glass from the giggling guest's hand on accident and splashed the contents across Karen's blouse. The sheer material clung to her, revealing the bare breasts beneath. She screamed at the icy shock of IPA and then covered up in embarrassment. Her free hand slapped the partygoer's cheek on reflex. The wide grin melted from the man's weathered face as the red handprint formed in its stead. He picked up the plastic pint glass from the floor and twisted it between his fingers, glaring at Karen through it. He pressed the rim into Carlton's chest. "Ain't that something? Not even a crack." He giggled again in a pitch that betrayed his stocky build. "Yeah, lots of new things in the world, huh?" Carlton cleared his throat. "Seriously, sorry about that, though." "No sense crying over spilled hooch," the man said with a chuckle before turning to Karen. "And you shouldn't be so quick to hide such wonderful tits. At least let an old man earn the smack you gave him." He licked his plump lips. "What the fuck did you say?" Darren grabbed the back of the man's shirt and slung him to the wall. "Darren, take it easy," Carlton called out. He took a step forward, fists clenched and ready to defend Karen's honor, when a walking refrigerator whisked between them like a leaf on a breeze. Darren's face bounced off a muscular chest. The security guard glared down at Darren and growled for him to be cool. That high-pitched giggle pierced the crowd again, and the guard turned to give the man the same warning. The Goliath pressed his finger into the man's chest. "I don't see a pass around your neck," he grumbled. The man giggled again and made a show of patting down his own torso. "I seem to have set it down somewhere." He scratched at the barren stretch of flesh where the scar created a second part in his hair. "I'll bet I left it in the restroom if you'd like to escort me to retrieve it." The security guard clamped his hand on the back of Giggle's neck and led him away. I think I'll do just that, pal. What in the actual fuck? Darren shook his head. Just some harmless old goon, Carlton said. Come on, Karen, let's go to your room and get you cleaned up. Maggie hooked her arm through Karen's and turned to Carlton. She kissed his cheek. We'll meet you two at the bar. I came for the fireworks, not to watch you two get into a drunken brawl. Behave. You sure this is the bathroom you used? The guard grunted. Oh yes, I'm positive of it. The man smoothed his hair in the mirror. I suppose it's possible I left it in my room, however. What's your name? The guard unclipped his radio. I'll go have someone check for it. The man chewed his bottom lip, tittering excitedly. The hell is your deal, man? Ain't nothing funny about that. My name's Otis. He cackled suddenly, making the guard jump. He tucked his hands in his pockets and looked around the bathroom. Can you stop being creepy as shit long enough to tell me your last name too? It's Kilgore. Otis Kilgore. Otis straightened up. All right, Otis. The guard raised the radio and paused. Hey, wasn't that the guy that killed all... The blade jabbed into the crevice of his hip and then glided up his body and through the thick cords of his neck. Otis pumped the pocket knife into his kidney and lung before the giant batted him away. Otis crashed through the stall door and landed on a toilet. The guard stomped toward Otis, who tapped his feet gleefully. The behemoth slipped in the arterial blood cascading down his body and crashed to his knees. Otis stood and stroked the man's cheek. Pardon my amusement, Otis chuckled, but you can't have slaughter without laughter. He jammed the knife through the guard's ear and tipped him over. He snorted in an attempt to suppress a burst of excitement. Otis bent and retrieved the radio from the man's belt. He pressed the call button. I need a room check on a rowdy guest, he wheezed. 10-4, what's the name? A voice answered. I'm afraid I didn't catch the last name with all the commotion, Otis said. I heard his buddy call him Darren. A long moment of silence followed before the voice came back. Looks like we got a Darren Hildebrand in 303. Say, who is this? I don't recognize the voice. Otis giggled. Can you believe that asshole? Karen pressed a cigarette between her lips. Have you got a light? Darren insists on lighting them for me. Maggie looked beside her to the crystal ashtray on the dresser and collected the book of matches bearing the OK Brewing logo. Compliments of the house. She broke one off and struck it. Karen puffed the cigarette to life, holding her soaked blouse up for examination before dropping it into the trash can. She blew smoke from the corner of her mouth. It had probably stained before we got home anyhow. Maggie tucked the matches into her jeans. The only thing I love more than your thriftiness is your modesty. Want to put your boobs away now? Karen pressed them together. Jealous much, Maggie Man-chest? She laughed, then realized the high school nickname still struck a nerve. Sorry, Mags. No biggie. Maggie stood and stretched, and flicked Karen's nipple. Ouch! Karen covered up and retrieved her suitcase. Fine, I'll put them away, you salty bitch. You enjoyed it. Maggie winked and collected the cigarette. Hurry up. We need to babysit the boys before they do something stupid. Karen slipped on a new shirt and buttoned it quickly. You don't think that creepy old man will bother us again, do you? Between booze and dementia, he probably won't realize he's met us before. Maggie opened the door and waved for her to follow. Karen grabbed her lanyard and tossed it over her neck before rushing to catch up. I'm just worried is all, Karen said as she struggled with a few more buttons before giving up. If she showed enough cleavage, someone might mistake her for a beer wench and tip her at least. Oh shit! What now? Maggie rolled her eyes. I forgot my clutch. Karen smacked Maggie's ass. Keep the guys at the bar and I'll be right down. Karen twisted the antique key in the lock and stepped into the room. The handbag was waiting on the edge of the dresser. Her eyes flicked on the stains on the carpet. Ruddy footprints that turned to a tight circle. Her lip quivered and the cigarette fell away. The realization hit her a moment before the door slammed shut and the hand clamped over her mouth. "You're not as pretty as my last girlfriend," Otis hissed over her shoulder. Wet steel lifted the blouse from her skin. "But I bet you're beautiful on the inside." She screamed into his palm as the blade sank in. Otis shrieked with laughter and slid the knife down, separating buttons and flesh. Karen squirmed for freedom, emptying her torso that much quicker. "What's taking Karen so long?" Carlton checked his watch again. A screaming guest cut off any reply. The trio ran toward the commotion. A man vomited in the hall while another sobbed against the chevroned wallpaper. A guard pushed his way into the bathroom and shouted profanities at his discovery. Maggie nudged through the crowd for a better look. The blood pool told her to stop, but she leaned into the bathroom further and saw the corpse sprawled on the tile. She slapped a hand over her mouth and ran back to the guys. "That guard from earlier," she whimpered. "He's been killed." "Let's go get Karen and get the fuck out of here," Darren said. They made their way to the staircase when a serving girl wiggled to them with a gift bag in her hand. "Are you Darren?" she asked. Darren nodded. She held up the bag. "Some old guy gave me $20 to bring this to you. He said it was an apology for earlier." She handed over the bag and waited around for a tip. When it was clear there wasn't one, she huffed and scampered off. Darren looked around the crowd for the man. "Y'all go get Karen and I'll wait here. That sick fuck said he was going to the bathroom, remember?" Maggie tugged Carlton's arm. They made it to the landing when Darren shrieked and fell to his knees. The couple ran back down, and Carlton threw an arm around his friend. "What happened?" Maggie picked up the bag and looked inside, immediately dropping it and turning to puke. "Jesus," Carlton whispered. The tipped bag spilled its contents on the floor before them. Carlton's eyes locked on to the severed breasts. He slid away from them and tried to stand before fainting at the foot of the stairs. Maggie wiped her mouth on her sleeve in time to see Darren storming up the staircase. "I'm coming, motherfucker!" he shouted. "I'm going to tear your goddamn heart out!" More people were pushing down the hall to see what the commotion was, and more screams echoed out of the bathroom when they found out. Someone pulled a fire alarm. The klaxon sounded with staccato bursts of strobe lights. The squeaking wheels of an antiquated luggage cart was barely audible over the ruckus. Maggie watched the crowd split between those running for their lives and the ones that were waiting their turn to see the dead guy. A giggle sent a shiver up her spine right before the blow landed. She slumped to the floor, fighting unconsciousness. The old man smiled over her as he hefted her onto the cart. Another buffed-up Hulk in a security t-shirt grabbed the lunatic's shoulder. "What's going on here? Don't you hear the fire alarm?" he barked. The old-timer giggled. "Kids these days," he gestured to Maggie. "They can't hold their hooch. Just loading my nephew and his girlfriend up to get them out of here quicker, sir." "Good plan." The guard, hired for his imposing size and not his intellect, slapped the man's arm. "Hurry up and get them to the lawn." "Yes, sir." Maggie blinked twice, and then blacked out. Maggie's eyes flicked open and closed until vision edged fuzzily from the abyss of unconsciousness. The world around her was a kaleidoscope of swimming colors and dancing lights. Someone had shut off the fire alarm, and far away the first responders' sirens were caterwauling down the country roads to the Springer Hotel. The spotlights outside continued their dance across the facade of the hotel and brought the 12-foot-tall stained glass rose window into focus.
Maggie slowly became aware of the plush leather chair cushioning her body, and then the cords that bound her to it by the wrists. She turned the chair to take in her surroundings. Across the ornate desk, Darren was strapped to another, less expensive chair in a similar fashion, only he was stark nude. His mauled, bloody nose told her he'd gone down just as painful as she did. OK Brewing ads were framed on the wood-paneled walls, and shelves held industry awards and commemorative bottles. In the center of the room was a pedestal with a glass case atop and a mason jar inside on a decorative pillow. Their captor was nowhere to be seen in the vast office. "Where?" Maggie cleared her throat and tried again. "Where are we?" Darren sniffled. "The CEO's office. I recognize it from the brochure." "Did you find Karen?" Maggie braced herself, already knowing the answer. "Is she really gone?" "He butchered her." Darren broke down, crying loudly and struggling against his bonds. "He cut her to pieces, Maggie." "Shh," Maggie hissed. "You have to keep it down. We don't know how far he's gone. He could hear you." I'm sorry." Darren choked on the words. "The police, they're coming. They've got to be." Maggie pushed her chair along the carpet. "Yeah, to investigate a murder, not to rescue us. They won't even have a head count until tomorrow." She rounded the desk and rolled closer to Darren. "Untie me." Darren wiggled his hand until he got his fingers on the knot that held her left arm in place. "Maybe Carlton will tell them we're missing and they'll come find us." "Maybe." She scanned the room for her boyfriend. The hazy memory of her capture replayed in the back of her mind. Maybe Carlton woke up and ran. Or maybe he woke up and got himself killed. Her attacker's words came back to her slowly like letters floating in a bowl of alphabet soup until they made a sentence again. "Keep working the knot," she whispered. The door swung open, and the old man entered with a skip. "Oh, goody! You're awake." He giggled excitedly and grabbed the back of Maggie's chair. Darren tugged the knot hard until the man wheeled her away and tore the cord from his fingers. The man parked Maggie next to the desk and opened one of the drawers. He clicked on the vintage lamp to rifle through the contents until he squealed happily. The shears gleamed in the dim, amber light. "These will do just fine." He stroked Maggie's cheek with the point, and then went for Darren. "I was afraid you two would sleep right through the big moment." "It's almost midnight." "The blackout at the asylum." Maggie swiveled her chair slightly. Darren had made some slack in the knot, and she rolled her wrist slowly to loosen it further. "I saw it on the news a few days ago. They said there were too many bodies to tell if anyone escaped. But you did, didn't you? You set that many creative, free spirits loose in one place, and things are bound to get interesting," the man said with a gentle tittering. "The blackout was a gift from God, and one should never refuse a gift." "So," Maggie tugged softly to see if she could squeeze out, "who are you?" "Why, you're right. I feel like I've known you so long that I plain forgot to introduce myself." He knelt on the floor in front of Darren and tapped his fingers on his captive's knee. A watch alarm beeped in the hallway. Maggie let her head hang and bit her lip when the door started to open. She kept her eyes closed as she raised her head and hoped she was wrong. She wasn't. "The cops will be here in a few minutes," Carlton said. "We don't really have time for this, Uncle Otis." "You should never rush a celebration, Carl." Carl nodded anxiously. "That's true, I suppose. We can take the bootlegger tunnel in the basement all the way to the fireworks bunker. There's an electric cart there. No sound and a 4-hour battery. There's a farm a few miles away. By the time the cops search this place, we'll be free and clear, but we need to go soon." "Of course, my dear boy. But it's not really New Year's." He slid the chrome blades around Darren's scrotum. Until the ball drops. The giggling disappeared in the wave of Darren's frantic screams as the scissors closed slowly on the wrinkled flesh. Maggie jerked her arm free while her psycho boyfriend laughed it up with his long-lost uncle. She worked the knot on her other hand and freed herself as Darren's cries turned sharper. The glands plopped on the shag carpet and his head lulled. Maggie launched herself from the chair, snatching a trophy from the desk adorned with a gold-plated beer keg. The ornament twinkled on its arcing path toward Carlton. The stone base stamped a dent into his forehead, and a backswing snapped the keg off and sent it, and a few teeth, through the glass case resting on the pedestal. Otis buried the shears into Maggie's thigh. She cried out and collapsed beside him. The madman straddled her, squeezing her throat with his free hand and leaning close. His hot, fetid breath was like roaches crawling across her cheek. She twisted her head away from him, her arms stretched for something she could use to free herself. "My nephew's letters told me how sweet your candy was." Otis ran his tongue across her ear. He pressed the point of the scissors into her belly and laughed hysterically at the impending kill. "I only wish I had the time to taste it." "Taste these." Maggie shoved the severed testicles into his open mouth. Otis leaned back, twisting to spit them out. Maggie grabbed his hand and shoved it toward him, lodging the scissors into his pudgy belly. Otis ripped the office cutlery from his abdomen and raised them overhead. "You bitch!" Maggie jammed her fingers into the wound, pressing deeper until she felt something slippery between the tips. She spread her fingers, tearing the wound and drawing a fresh scream from Otis. Her hand pushed through and disappeared inside him as she clenched her fingers around the tissue. Maggie jerked her hand free, and gravity did the rest. The intestines twisted out of the new orifice like a worm wriggling on a hook. Otis rolled away, screeching. He discarded the scissors to push his guts back in as he crawled for the door. Carlton groaned on the floor and staggered to his feet after a series of failed attempts. Maggie stood next to the pedestal and read the little plaque in front of the decorative pillow. The jar of moonshine was the only thing that survived the fire in 1931. She hefted the mason jar and examined the contents. Carlton rubbed the oozing wound in the center of his head and cleared the blood from his eyes just in time for the container to meet his face. He staggered backwards and fell on top of the desk. Maggie dug in her pocket and limped closer while Carlton struggled to remove a shard of glass from his cheek. Can't we talk?" He held up his hands defensively. "I mean, you don't turn your back on family. Right, Maggie? You get it, don't you?" Maggie struck a match and twisted it between her fingers. "I told you, I came for the fireworks." Carlton slowly lifted his shirt to his nose and sniffed the alcohol-saturated fibers. "Oh, shit!" He rolled over the desk. "Come on, Mags! This isn't you! You're not a killer!" New year, new me. She lit the book, igniting the remaining matches in a sulphurous flash. Compliments of the house. Maggie tossed the matchbook and Carlton ignited instantly. The flames flared over his face as he spun, sprinting for the giant window and diving through it. The stained glass fell through the spotlights like shards of a shattered rainbow as he plummeted toward the cool salvation of the beer fountain. Maggie stood in the empty frame and glanced down. Carlton's burning body danced on the end of Poseidon's trident. Maggie watched until it went still. His jaw tore away from the prongs, and his corpse dumped into the fountain with a puff of steam and an anticlimactic sizzle. She ambled away from the window, collected the scissors from the carpet, and made her way to the stairwell. Her leg throbbed as her toes squished with each step as the blood collected in her boot. She limped down the stairs, following the crimson trail left by Otis and leaving her own as she braced a bloody hand on the wall for balance. In the basement, she found the pile of boards where Carlton had reopened the bootlegger tunnel, and beside them, the carpenter's hatchet he used to pull them down. She slipped the scissors into her pocket and scooped up the small axe before continuing her pursuit. In the stretch of pitch black, a flashlight danced unsteadily ahead of her. Maggie didn't know how long the tunnel went on, so she pushed herself to catch up. If Otis got out first, he'd get in the cart and disappear before anyone could catch him. She couldn't let that happen. Maggie bit her tongue to keep the screams at bay. She just needed to get closer. The light dropped, followed by a curse. It rolled chaotically before it steadied and rose. Otis had fallen, and Maggie used it to her advantage, pushing her wounded leg into a hobbling sprint. "Otis!" she cried out. The light stopped moving. Otis giggled maniacally and started to turn. She reached back and hurled the hatchet. The laughter turned to a howl as the blade found its target. Maggie watched the beam swirl and fall to the ground once again. The flashlight rolled down the path, and she retrieved it on her way. Otis was sprawled in the gravel with the hatchet sticking out of his skull, intersecting his scar. Not again," he whimpered. "I haven't seen you since last year, Otis." Maggie shined the light in his face and drew the scissors from her pocket. "Did your nephew's letters tell you we used to go axe throwing with Darren and Karen?" Otis smiled slowly. His giggling turned to a rasping cough. Maggie knelt beside him and worked her fingers into his waistband. "You know, I think I missed it earlier. The part where the ball dropped." Otis wasn't laughing anymore. Maggie wiped her fingers on her jeans, collecting more blood than she got off, and flipped the ignition switch. The little golf cart jutted forward and whirred across the manicured grounds to the wall of flashing lights waiting at the Springer Hotel. Her mind roamed as the cart bounced along the path. She wondered if this would make it into the movie, or if they'd save it for the sequel. The final look of shock on Otis Kilgore's face as she left him in that tunnel would make a great fade to black. Maggie thought about him bleeding out in the darkness and started to giggle.
Stakes and Shoguns by Dan Wilder, dedicated to David DeNoyer. It was the last day of 1899 that a group of brave souls put to rest the embodiment of all things satanic, the vile Lord of the Night, the great dragon, Count Dracula, laid low by means of wood, steel, fire, and love. They celebrated the coming of the new year in darkest Transylvania that year, raising many tankards of spiced mead and toast of their great victory over the darkness. Their minds and hearts filled with an abundance of faith in the pureness of humanity's will and its unwavering ability to extinguish the flame of hell's emissaries. Fucking dumbasses. I hate falling asleep here. You always wake up with a film on the roof of your mouth, and the 1-2 punch of stale popcorn and even more stale piss can really take the wind out of your sails. And don't even get me started on the bums that come in here just to warm up and occasionally die. There were a gaggle of such gents in the front row this very night, and they cared about the first feature of the evening, a retitled re-release of Blood Shack, which had been cycled through this theater at least 5 times in as many years as I did. I was here to see Shogun Assassin, which I missed on its first go-around earlier this year thanks to work commitments, but I'd be damned if I missed it again. Hell, the trailer alone made it seem like it would be the bloodbath of the century, which you'd think I'd try to avoid given my profession, but there was nowhere else I'd rather spend New Year's Eve. So yeah, now I'm awake and hungry. I made my way to the lobby and found it both quiet and empty, which it never is. Giving it a full minute with no sign of life, I stole a bucket of popcorn and a watered-down soda, neither of which I felt guilty about since they taste like crap on a good day.
I made it back just in time to catch an earful of the raunchy "Our Feature Presentation" theme, which made a porno score sound sedate by comparison, with its paint swirl graphic accompaniment. Now, if all that happened next was I ate purloined treats and watched a man and his young child fuck up a good-sized hunk of ancient Japan in a whirlwind of wholesome violence, then this would be a boring yarn to lay on you. But for a solid hour, that's exactly what went down. But wait, it gets better in a New York Minute. At random intervals, there would be a mild movement from the huddled forms of the homeless dudes in the front row. But whatever was going on, they were mercifully keeping it to themselves for once. Until they didn't. Now, one aside about Shogun Assassin, it frequently features blood spraying everywhere like a nightmare money shot. And it was during one such scene that I noticed one of the bums had wandered up to the screen and was trying to catch the on-screen blood rain in his open mouth. What in the fuck now? Next, he tried to lick the screen, which was when I took action. "Hey, fucko, sit your ass down!" Now, usually that was all it would take with these folks to return to some semblance of order, but not this time. Nope. I had just fucked up royally. You know how a cat's eye shines in the dark? Screenlicker's did too when he turned to look at me. Speaking of cats, he hissed at me as well, which was both rude and unnerving. All I could do for a few seconds was stare in open-mouthed dumbassery at the rapidly approaching figure, a figure that was bounding across the tops of rickety theater seats like a demented wolf. I gripped the wooden armrest of my theater seat so tightly it snapped off. Not much of a Herculean result given the state of the theater. Within a heartbeat, the creature had lifted me from my seat with one hand and stared into my eyes with those freaky, glowing peepers of his. I was nearly mesmerized, but regained my senses enough to mutter, "You're a vampire?" When the being opened its jaws wide as a snake and twin fangs descended wetly from its whiskey-scented gums. As if by instinct, I shoved the jagged edge of my broken armrest directly through the creature's heart. The being crumpled and had dissolved to bones before it hit the cum and gum-encrusted floor. I tried desperately to catch my breath, but more hissing erupted from the peanut gallery. I know where your mind is headed. This badass took out the rest of those fangbangers next in a shocking and entertaining explosion of raw action. I agree, that sounds amazing. I puked instead. Oh shit, maybe I was a tad unclear as to my profession. I work reception at a blood bank. Anyway, it turns out I had more than enough time to spray vomit on seats that were no strangers to such actions. As the Master of Death succumbed to our hero's sword on screen, I could see that the remainder of the front row were feeding upon themselves instead of hunting me down. Apparently, cheap booze and supernatural monsters are not good friends. This time I wised up and made a run for it. So the lobby was still dead and completely without anything remotely useful as a weapon, and the front doors and fire exits seemed to be welded shut, so that's just fucking great. The adjoining theater was without patrons, but a swarm of bats swirled around the light from the projection booth as a horny fishman was making sweet, scaly love to his less than enthused partner. Their red eyes turned towards me, and I slammed that door shut. I can't believe I'm going to die without seeing that fucking movie again. The manager's office was sans manager, but +1 shaker of garlic salt, so I had that one going for me. I mean, if vampire movies were to be believed. I'm so fucked. Looking out the office's sealed tight window, I could see drunken revelers making their way down the street, completely oblivious to the impending Hammer Films scenario about to play out in this greasy little shithole. As if on cue, The door to the room exploded into a million pieces as those bats finally caught up to me. I tore the top of the garlic salt off and began flailing it like a madman possessed. The barrage hit the bats dead on. Eventually, and they fell to the ground in smoking, screeching piles. I made my way through the thickening haze and hauled ass back downstairs. And that's when I heard the cry for help. Someone was clearly calling for help as I flew pell-mell into the lobby, someone in the theater I had currently occupied. For fuck's sake, I made my way to the theater door and cracked it open. Well, the movie had ended, so there's that. Cautiously, I made my way into the silent auditorium. I walked past my bile-soaked seat, and there, untouched by puke particles, was my pilfered beverage. I grabbed it and took a pull. Water with just a hint of cola flavor. I'd sampled this vintage before. In the now raised house lights, I could see the absolutely nauseating scene inside. The vamps had eaten themselves to death, double death, and from under what could only be charitably referred to as a gut pile came that pained call for assistance. As I neared the mountain of reeking carnage, a hand darted skyward, sending glistening red bits in every direction. Help! Please, for all that's holy, help me! Against my better judgment, I grabbed the wrist of that mystery arm and tugged hard. You know that sound when you dump a slow-moving turd of dog food from the can and it finally shimmies its way free? That was the sound that filled the air, although it was a great deal louder. A bearded man, his thin frame covered in gore, fell from the mound of formerly human Sloppy Joe. Thank you, my son. He punctuated that statement with a sour wine belch. You a holy man? Formerly, my flock has sadly gone astray, he gagged. Any idea what's going on here? Sadly, I do, he said, his brows furrowed and dripped one bodily fluid after another. Go on. I went to the bathroom. Turning wine into piss. Jesus would be proud. I was pretty happy with that one, though the hobo didn't even react. Even at the end, I can't catch a break. In there, I saw the manager of this fine establishment kneeling in one of the stalls. He started sobbing like a baby. Come on, spit it out, you pious motherfucker. He was what? Giving who I believe was Dracula here's what I know. This dude from the garbage plate used to be a priest, comes here to get warm and I can't believe I'm going to say this, gave Count Dracula a BJ in the bathroom. Yeah, turns out when he was done with the manager, he used his mesmerism to continue on with the padre there. When said encounter happened, he could see things from Dracula's mind. Him surviving a murder plot, his arrival in Manhattan in the turn of the century, his dwelling torn down and a movie theater erected while he slumbered in the cold soil hidden below, and his resurrection through feeding on the homeless that sheltered in the cinema. This was all told over candy that had went off date a solid 4 months ago. I refilled my water soda and took a long pull. Now, my plan here was to spit out some cool-ass catchphrase and make a plan for trying to get away from this nightmare, maybe build some sweet weapons. But the smoke got in my lungs. Wait, smoke? Those damn bats! They came a-flopping and smoldering down the stairs into the lobby, and they were looking more healthy by the second. Come on, think! Wait, were the bats melting together? I took the final pull off my drink and tossed the cup to the ground. The bats had formed one large bat that strode forward, walking on its wings. It roared at us. As it slowly advanced, its bulk smashed into the concession stand, sending popcorn and soda cups in every direction. That's when it hit me. A priest. Water soda. I bet that could be one hell of a holy water. Hey, Father, do you think you have it in you to bless some water? He burped. I took that as a yes. Now this was a plan. Except I finished my drink, and the soda fountain had been smashed to shittereens by the Drac attack. That's when an idea occurred. I was about to die, and I really needed to take a piss. I mean, I could probably just let it go at this point. What a shitty way to go. Think. That could work. Father, does it matter what vessel the holy water flows from? 2 burps. That's clearly a no. It was then that I whipped it out and turned towards the priest. Yo, Father, bless this. He held a trembling hand above my stream and said something. Regardless, it worked, and I hosed that hell beast down good. As his flesh sizzled, Dracula hissed, screamed something in a language I didn't understand, burst back into his bat form and exploded through the glass doors of the lobby and out into the frigid winter night. The priest had dozed off. I stepped over the broken glass and out onto the street. More New Year's revelers passed, laughing onward into the night, a night that now contained the greatest evil known to mankind, an evil waiting to strike again.
Alien Zombie Punks from Upstate New York by Dan Wilder. Why is it so dark in here? Damn it! I just hit my head on a ceiling? Wait a minute. I think I'm dead. Let's see if I can piece this thing together. We went into the city earlier. It was me, Sloppy Suicide, or Ricky, as he was known before last year, Debbie, and myself. We strolled around the city streets, which were both 10 to 20 degrees warmer than the streets of the nowhere mountain town we left 3 hours earlier, but also inexplicably smelled like chocolate-flavored breakfast cereal, which was strange but better than the leather mill runoff that usually tickled our noses with its award-losing scent of sickly sweet putrescence mixed tenderly with chemicals that were most likely banned everywhere else in the free world. Anyway, earlier our punk rock asses clambered into Sloppy's busted-up conversion van with bags of snacks and beer and began the long drive to the Big Apple. It was already snowing steadily as we tore down the roads leading to the highway entrance that would bring us close to our ultimate destination, Max's Kansas City, for a likely to be unforgettable night of punk music and New Year's revelry. But the chains wrapped securely around the van's tires kept us thankfully on the road no matter how dicey the weather was. Apparently it was in part forgettable because piecing this shit together is getting harder. But I digress. So we walk around, got buzzed, Debbie bought a few trinkets from the street vendors, and eventually we wandered our way over to the venue. After arriving and stepping gracefully over a disturbingly large puddle of puke, we stepped inside. The place was wall-to-wall punks, bullshitting, drinking, being charmingly rude, all of our greatest qualities brought out in mass. We mingled, we drank, we were loud, and soon the opening band lurched to life. I can't for the life of me remember their names, but they sang fast, aggressive songs about alienation, indiscriminate fucking. There might have even been a television cover in there. They were quickly followed by more scruffy, snot-leaking bands that played 40-song sets in the space of 20 minutes apiece. So far, so worth it. The night wore on, but soon the headliners took the stage, coming straight from the wilds of New Jersey. These folks looked for all the world could tell like ghouls returned from the dead to raise unholy hell, and they were louder and more confrontational than all the other acts combined. Wait a minute, ghouls. That triggers something to fire off deep within my brain. The scream started from the back of the club, but it was barely audible over the din of the band and the crowd cheering them on. Occasionally the band's bass player, a hulking dude with long black hair brushed in front of his face, would smash his instrument into anyone foolish enough to dare to get on stage. Onward they played, bringing us chain gang choruses and 3 angry chords all wrapped around tales of the Kennedy assassination, teenagers from outer space, and satanic werewolves. And subtly, the crowd noise became less and less. I have no idea what compelled me to turn around, but I did. Then quickly regretted it. In the front of the house, someone, or more accurately, something, moved among the crowd swiftly. The being's eyes reflected light not unlike a dog or a cat, which was disquieting enough for sure, but the fact that it was seemingly murdering patrons left and right was undoubtedly its worst feature. I turned back to warn Debbie S. and Debbie, but another shadow being had torn them to pieces before setting to work on the band, who admittedly fought like leather-clad berserkers, but no amount of leather-clad muscle and violence could stop the creatures whose numbers had now swollen to 4. Upon seeing this, I did the only sane thing I could think of. I ran the fuck out of there. I pushed through the throng, slid constantly on barf blood and Lord knows what other bodily secretions before I burst out onto the city street. The heavily falling snow made everything seem like a Christmas card-worthy winter wonderland, but the sky held less enchanting prospects. Far above the skyscrapers, meteors streaked across the sky, leaving violet trails in their wake. I ran on, passing various New Yorkers, staring uncharacteristically in shock as feet away one of the meteors hit the sidewalk, splitting it violently. One of the shadow beings rose from the smoking rubble and immediately attacked a bystander, sending a geyser of blood up into the frigid night sky, the resulting crimson rain freezing to red ice as soon as it collided with the ground in steam-hissing droplets. Shit. Why is this happening? I thought stereotypically as I tore ass on and on without a destination and no other motivation than saving my narrow ass from getting ripped a new one from astro monsters falling from the heavens. A few blocks down, things got much worse. I saw one of the shadow creatures attack a woman, but amazingly it didn't finish her off before it bounded off after a faster-moving victim that ran like a fucking cartoon character over a sheet of ice before regaining his footing and speeding off into the night. Against all common sense, I made my way over to the woman to try and help her. But upon arrival, she was a complete and total mess that looked more like a plate of discarded spaghetti and red sauce than a young lady out for a stroll. Please just hold me, she whimpered. I did, immediately soaking my best t-shirt in blood. What's your name? I asked, mainly because it's what I saw characters do on TV when they encountered similar, deeply shitty situations. Olivia, she muttered weakly. That's a great name, I said unconvincingly. So, what brings you out tonight? What the hell kind of question was that? In response to my quandary, her eyes glazed over cataract white. Suddenly, she sat up straight and shoved me back hard, sending me directly on my ass. A hiss escaped her now blue lips, which were flecked with neon green phlegm. Her gums had retracted to the point where her teeth now appeared ginormous. Speaking of teeth, she began clicking them together rhythmically. Somewhere behind me, I heard a slight commotion, which quickly grew in intensity before a group of... What the hell are these things? Zombies? Yeah, let's go with that. A group of zombies spilled forth from a nearby bodega, their limbs flailing wildly as they moved both fast and clumsily forward. I screamed and possibly peed a tad and booked it like a freight train straight out of hell. I ran until my lungs burned from the freezing air. Then I made the absolutely idiotic decision to stop for a sec and get my shit together. The zombies were on me before you could say George A. Romero. I felt no pain, but darkness soon took me. I came to for the briefest of seconds. The sound of unearthly trumpets filled the sky, and as soon as they arrived, the creatures formed back into meteors and rose into the sky as the strange music became more and more like sirens. Blackness came for me again. And then I woke up to even more blackness and a minor head injury from the aforementioned ceiling. I stared into the darkness before my eyes finally settled on a sliver of light down by my feet. I slid forward on my back and pressed my feet towards the light. Damn. Whatever I pushed up against was cold. Cold, but very forgiving. A door opened, letting harsh, fluorescent light smash into my eyes with wild abandon. I pushed forward and immediately fell onto the rigid tile floor. It took me about 3.7 seconds to realize where I was. The morgue. I looked down at my now bare feet and removed the manila tag that was tied around my big toe. I have no idea what had happened to me, but I was definitely not dead. I caught my reflection in a nearby mirror mounted on the wall. I wasn't a zombie either. Then I saw the two forms rise from the gurneys behind me. Rick, Sloppy, whoever, and Debbie sat up. They were nude minus the thin sheets that covered them, but Sloppy's mohawk was unmistakable, since it was hot pink with electric blue tips. It took a minute, but I could tell they were much the same as Olivia from earlier in the evening. But their faces seemed downright friendly instead of, menacing as could possibly fucking be. You guys look like shit. Thanks, pal. You look naked. I hadn't noticed it before, but Sloppy was right. I was every bit as naked as my friends. But where I was shivering from the coldness of the room, they seemed to be as cozy as could be. My eyes darted around the room for something to cover up in, and then they fell on a plastic bin filled with my clothes, wallet. Hell, even my beat-to-shit Doc Martens were accounted for. I crossed the room and pulled on my clothes. So, what's new with you two? Well, we were ripped apart by aliens and woke up as zombies, but, doesn't feel too bad, Debbie said cheerfully. You guys don't want to eat me? Not particularly, no. Turn me into one of you? Nope, Sloppy said flatly. Well, what do you want to do? We sat at Max's drinking our stolen beer. Just me and my two naked zombie pals. The walk back was uneventful. This particular area of the city seemed completely abandoned. Only corpses remained. Occasionally we'd hear noises of happy crowds from deeper within the city, or footsteps close behind us or from the rooftops. But if more creatures prowled tonight, we sure as fuck didn't see them. The entire thing was very Omega Man, to be quite honest. But as previously mentioned, one with less monsters for a change, so that was a big plus. Anyway, a punk and two naked zombies walked into a bar. No punchline. We just walked in, stole beer, and sat at a table surrounded by corpses on a chilly New Year's Eve night. Hell, as hard as it is to believe, the new year had already begun a few hours ago. Probably between the time we were eaten by monsters and waking up as either, one, a guy that obviously fainted at the prospect of being eaten when in fact some cosmic twist of fate called the herd home before said eating could take place, or two, as monsters that behave absolutely nothing like monsters that made them who, in turn, were made from other monsters from space. It makes perfect sense if you're drunk or mentally ill, or a combo of the two. So we sat and drank and laughed as if absolutely nothing was off in any way. It was kinda perfect, to be honest with you. So now what? What? I mean, You two can't exactly go back home again unless everyone in your family... Fuck that. If the whole damn town was suddenly stricken blind... You know, that's kind of mean, but totally true, don't you think, Rick? Debbie asked, a little string of neon green phlegm/drool escaping from her mouth as she spoke. It does make sense. You're not going to correct her for calling you Rick? After being dead, I don't know. The nickname seems tacky now. It's not just now, kiddo, Debbie countered. Rick flipped her the bird playfully. I think the first thing we should do is assess just how far this thing spread. The rest of the city seems okay, but here, you'd think there'd be emergency crews or something, I said, looking for a TV or radio we could use. I finally located a small transistor radio behind the bar and switched it on. Only static filled the air no matter what channel I tuned to. Well, so much for that. Rick got up and wandered around the room for a minute. I think we have to consider something else, he said solemnly. Which is? Those things will be back. You can bet on that. What makes you so sure? Debbie asked, her white, pupilless eyes staring blankly. Why come all this way, rip shit up for under an hour, then just piss off back to whatever demented homeworld could spawn Space Invader rejects that turn people into zombies, most of which are hungry for human flesh, except when they aren't, like me and Deb? That seems like a solid assumption. Maybe this was like a dry run, test shit out, see how it goes, Debbie said quietly. I'd say it went swimmingly with the exception of you guys. What if we are the desired result, and the others were failures? Rick offered. No offense, but naked zombies that are no different than regular humans other than looks seems like an experiment created by an asshole convention, or just by someone that has next to zero common sense. I mean, they're aliens, presumably. Maybe their standards of intelligence are vastly different from ours. As logical as anything else that's gone on tonight. Debbie, can I talk to you in private for a moment? Ricky asked, sounding more like an adult than I've ever heard him before. Debbie and Ricky crossed to the opposite end of the room. They stood silhouetted by the stage lights that remained on. I couldn't help but wonder what in the hell was so damn important, but I didn't have a long time to contemplate as soon as they returned to the table. So, listen, man, me and Deb were just talking, and we have a proposition for you. Is this going to get weirdly sexual? Debbie and Rick laughed until they coughed up more green goo that hung tenaciously to their cold, blue lips. No, it's more like dinner plans. Spill it. Let's say, for instance, that those cosmic creeps make a return engagement tonight. Do you think your chances of continued survival are greater or lesser given your current state? Obviously, to be like you would help, but I'm not too keen on joining the ranks of the shambling dead. We move around just fine. And we're impervious to the cold, Deb added merrily. That's all well and good, but say I agree to this. What makes you so sure I won't end up like the others? Because we aren't like that. And we'll both bite you. Better your chances that way. And then what do? Hide out. Maybe gather some weapons. If they think we're on their side, we may be able to just walk up and pop them before they know what hit them. I truly hate it when you make reasonable arguments. Is that a yes? I mean, back home is comfortable, but I can't help but think I have a greater purpose in life than being a counter jockey at a video store. Saving the whole damn planet would definitely qualify for that. Fuck. All right, I'm in. Debbie barely let out an excited yay before the biting began. When I woke up, I felt nothing. No more cold, no more warmth. Thankfully, no hunger. Eventually, we gathered some supplies, clothes, and made our way back to our van. Soon, we were headed due west as we exited the city, which, besides the few blocks we spent the night on, seemed perfectly normal in every single way. For now. We sat under the hot desert sky just outside the trailer we had shared for over 14 years. We sipped lemonade from glasses adorned with various sci-fi flick characters more for nostalgia than anything, since we no longer required any food or drink whatsoever. As the years wore on, we became less and less sure our intergalactic enemies would ever return. But since we basically just hung out and watched TV and made music, it really didn't matter much. Until the day that changed. The saucer hovered low in the sky before releasing 3 meteors that collided with the desert floor. 3 shadow beings crossed the sand. We drew weapons we've never fired and prepared for what we guessed was coming. Except what came was vastly different than any scenario we had imagined over the years. The beings held out their smoky hands and our weapons vanished. "Didn't plan on that," Ricky whispered. Then the largest of the 3 spoke to us. "Hey folks, we just want to say sorry for the trouble we caused you as children. We've done some serious growth since then and realized how childish our prank was, but we were just young punks." We all looked at each other with our cataract eyes, and it finally all made sense. The anarchy, the chaos. We, as punks, held those beliefs dear. And so did our brothers from the stars. I cracked some beers and handed them to our guests. "So, what bands are you guys into?" New Year's Evil, a paranormal thriller from the case files of Caroline Quinn by Mike Ashkewe. New Year's Eve, 2012. End of the world, or so I hear. Yeah, right. It should be a time where you reflect on the year and how you've grown and what you should be grateful for, blah, 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 sentimental bullshit. I, on the other hand, loved going out for drinks with the girls. Pick up a guy or girl, whoever looks fun, and frankly, party on. This year is not going to be like that, or at least this story won't end up with me losing my shoes and doing the walk of shame into a 7-Eleven for a Slurpee on New Year's morning. Instead, you get me, your favorite Ghoul School graduate and recently instituted federal agent, Caroline Quinn, the government's own supernatural badass. We're called troubleshooters, and there aren't a lot of us. In my graduating class, there were maybe 5 others like myself, a blend of the superpowered and supernatural, aka the government-sponsored freak shows. Government goons who fight real-life monsters, the kind of stuff that was once only found in books and fairy tales. Cool, huh? However, that's not what's important. This part is actually pretty cool and not many know about it. Ghoul School. What's that, you ask? Well, back when the world, changed and suddenly superpowers and the supernatural just randomly started to coexist in the mid-1950s. So now we have assholes who can fly and assholes who suck blood, who can also fly, but it's complicated. Long story short, spandex fights Dracula and even the occasional Frankenstein-like things. We call them Frankies for short. Weirdly more common than you might think, and it's usually pharmaceutical companies. Anyway, so my mom was a vampire and my dad wasn't, but he was into the whole undead thing. Vamps are sexy, I guess. No, just gross, but I digress. My dad is what they call a ghoul, but not like an undead zombie thing, more like a bonded to vampiric host sort of thing. It sounds less fucked up if I use the science terms I learned at the academy. 9 months later, and I'm sure stuff that would render years of therapy if I lingered on it, I was born. So one night back when I was 12, a couple of bad-looking motherfuckers who looked like the Men in Black showed up for a chat. They pointed an ultraviolet shotgun at my mom and pistol-whipped my dad and said, "We know your kid is special. We're taking her, and if all goes nice and smooth, she'll see you when she graduates from our little school. Do anything but say that your daughter is on scholarship to a private school and you'll be dissected. Am I clear? That was my life for 6 years at Ghoul School. It never officially had a name, but all of us kids nicknamed it Ghoul School. And that's where I'm headed, and it happened to be in the dullest place you can imagine. Ohio. I know, right? I got a call from a friend, Sammy, who works at the school, and said that I needed to come home, but it absolutely had to be tonight. He sounded panicked, and that was not what I knew of Sammy. December 31st, 2012. This is not what I had planned for New Year's Eve this year. I had actually had a date tonight. She was a nice girl I met at the academy after I graduated. Her name was Rianne. She was cute, and I was totally into her. Instead, I drove through the backwoods of Ohio on New Year's and investigated something weird. It could be something, or it could be nothing entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Didn't need to be a super or something else to know something was going to go down at my old school. I was a few hours out from campus, near Youngstown. Sammy had said that he noticed some of the newer kids were acting weirder than normal, and something felt off. He'd mentioned that one day one of their cell phones was confiscated, and it had very threatening messages, and not something as fun as a school shooting either. No, seriously, how the fuck is that still a thing in 2012? Especially since now the kids can literally pack as much firepower into their own fists as some militaries. I guess I should be thankful someone who can melt people with their eyes hasn't had a bad day in PE. Yet. Way of the world, I guess. Still sucks, though. Anyway, Sammy had mentioned a name and that immediately set off alarm bells. Yasu. When things got weird in the world, things got weird. It wasn't just vampires and shit that became real. It was things that were like nuclear threat level worse. Demons, specters, and rumor has it even death gods. Things got understandably bizarre in the post-changed world, but things that literally could rise from the grave and command armies of the undead, I'm not a fan of, even if I share some of that supposed supernatural blood running in my veins. Part of my occult schooling involved learning about what new world I was a part of, but also the part that I would protect it and draw a paycheck at the same time. Get some great education, learn rules, laws, and regulations, and then privately enforce the law for Uncle Sam and protect the country, and even the world at large. It's a lot less cool than it sounds, but no student loans to pay back, so bonus? Yasu was some long-forgotten god from somewhere in Asia, and probably for good reason. A death cult that was left out of most history books and written off as myth by many. Now, there's not an unreasonable possibility that this thing was potentially returning for a comeback tour in 2012. Great timing, if I do say so myself. As a favorite cartoon of mine once said, he makes Gozer look like Little Mary Sunshine. Clearly, I'm in for a fun time if he's right, but I am so praying this is just a bunch of edgelords trying to look cool in a school full of weirdos. This is great, isn't it? A dipshit with a Twitter account thinks they can summon Great Value Cthulhu. Sammy knew something was up, but didn't want to get the kids in harm's way. Call me up and hopefully come in quickly, quietly, and do it before Uncle Sam decides to use all necessary force. The school had security, some superpowered individuals of their own, but something feels wrong. You should go back to your old school to say, "Hey, what's up? Let's grab a drink." Not me, though. I get to spend my New Year's Eve potentially stopping the resurrection of a death god. Or I break up some dorky kid's New Year's Eve party, which was their ticket into someone's pants for a night. Save the world or cockblock someone. Fuck. Please let this be a false alarm and just be someone overreacting to some kid trying to sound cool. I suppose on the bonus side of all this, I can stop by the old cafeteria and see if they still make the best tuna sandwich in Ohio. If I can make it there in time. Not exactly how I envisioned ringing in the new year. I should be getting drunk and getting laid, but here we are. Go me, right?
Don't go away. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
It's about 10 p.m. when I finally arrive at the school. Big, expensive, and like Oprah and Martha Stewart designed the campus. It was pretty in a weird, artificial sort of way, but definitely doesn't give off super secret government institution for superpowers vibes. You'd think someone built an Ivy League school in the middle of the woods, and on one hand, you're right, except it's fully razor wire enclosed and has armed patrols near its grounds. Definitely missed dinner, though. The cafe closed hours ago. I wasn't even checked by guards when crossing over the perimeter. Okay, that's not normal. Calling Sammy's cell and all I get is voicemail. I'm definitely not liking this. Parking in the visitor's lot, I step out into the cold December air. I look around the empty school grounds and I can hear music coming from somewhere close. I don't see anyone around, though. No guards, no kids, and definitely no one in charge. The parties should be happening in the dorms with the older kids. Gotta keep whatever damage happens to a minimum tonight. I guess I'm going non-lethal. Tasers, pepper spray. I also have my abilities. Super strength, speed, durability, beyond the means of mere mortals at least. And I can see in the dark most of the time. I also heal super quickly, should something be able to hurt me. I can shrug off most types of damage unless it comes from a supernatural or superpowered force, and it's pretty reasonable to assume that I'll run into some kind of trouble tonight. At the very least, I'm probably going to ruin my new winter coat, which I bought myself for Christmas. Wouldn't be a government operation without some cool toys, though. Director James Carlson, the new guy at the Department of Paranormal Researches, made sure we always had options in our field assignments. Now that's the kicker here, though. This isn't a sanctioned operation. This is so off the books that if I get caught or this makes the newspaper somehow, I am likely going to end up in some deep, dark cell in a prison where not even God could save me, unless he had proper security clearance. A lot is riding on this to keep it quiet, safe, and, above all, make sure no one gets hurt who doesn't need to. Maybe on second thought I better sling the toys and just keep it to pure non-lethals and stuff I can conceal in my purse or under my jacket. I'll take the taser and the spray, nice and tight. Don't want to draw too much attention to myself, but a 6-foot blonde who doesn't exactly dress conservatively is bound to raise a few eyebrows if I get spotted. I stop myself from breathing and focus all of my attention on listening to the environment around the school grounds. Focusing all my supernatural senses and just listening for real signs of life. Talking, movement, fucking anything that doesn't belong. A moment passes and I hear something in the dorms across the parking lot. I carefully isolate the sound from the music that's pounding and almost overwhelming my senses. This is deliberate. This music is covering something up, or is a part of it. A low murmur in a language I don't recognize, but I know it's bad news. It sounds like a group of voices are chanting or singing something deeply weird. Guess it's time to go. I feel weird leaving behind all the weapons in the car, in case I run into something a little harder to kill than some gifted weirdo with who knows what powers. I don't feel good leaving behind my actual handgun, but I'd rather not accidentally shoot through a wall and hurt someone. I briskly walk across the lot and head towards the courtyard in front of the school dorms. A lot of memories come flooding back as I cross the yard. I smile briefly as I look at one particular tree. That tree is where I kissed my first boyfriend, Dan. He was all right, but it was his sister who was really into me, and she and I dated for a few semesters. Surprisingly, Dan was cool about it because he wanted his sister, Lori, to be happy. They were good kids. It's too bad they didn't make it to graduation day. I miss them. A schoolyard fight went wrong, and one of the other freak shows decided to use their pyrokinetic abilities to burn them to cinders. School security didn't waste any time in putting down the offender in spectacular fashion. Security Officer Franklin Wick, aka Boyle, used his superpowers to liquefy the water inside the attacker and turned them into a bloody puddle. Fights at Ghoul School could get cataclysmic real fast if security didn't step in. I saw one kid who was partially a gargoyle get torn apart by the school's enhanced guard dogs. It wasn't pretty, and it put us in line pretty quick. The blood spatter wasn't something you could easily forget. There wasn't enough of Dan and Lori to bury. I don't even know if their parents know what really happened. A small tree is planted in the courtyard with a plaque that reads, "May they never be forgotten as we fight forward." I don't know how many died over the course of the school's history, but it's more than a few, but less than a fuck-ton. The government spends a lot of money to protect its investments. Not all kids who are either superpowered, gifted, or supernaturally inclined end up here, but it's enough to make sure it's protected. The United States stands on the front line of this weird occult war and tends to identify the most gifted individuals per its population. Most other nations try to keep those numbers quiet. The U.S. likes to wave its supernatural superhero dick around like a grinning idiot kid who found his dad's gun. Still, there are too many. But that's why I'm here. Maybe I can stop something bad before it really gets going, and somebody else gets hurt. I know it won't bring back Dan and Lori, but yeah, if I could do the right thing, then I absolutely should. Save the world, right? I'll call Sammy's phone one last time before I enter the dorms and hope he picks up. It rings and rings and rings, and then straight to voicemail. I pocket my phone and walk up the stone steps to the dorms. If Sammy is anywhere, it's probably here since he's one of the resident advisors and is probably in the resident advisor's office or in his own suite on the 4th floor. I creak open the double doors and enter the front area of the dorms. It's loud but unnaturally still at the same time. Weird, loud music echoes over the PA systems, and even some of the interior lights are flashing on and off, as if in time with the music. Well, this one just jumped up on the weird shitometer.
Did you hear that? Better check the locks on your doors. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
The front desk is empty as expected, but that may actually work to my advantage. I hop over the desk and thankfully don't tear the ass out of my jeans as I do. The security system is still open and active, and I have a whole suite of cameras across the entire building to look in on. Examining multiple cameras across the 4 floors, and almost immediately I come across the bad news I've been expecting. The 4th floor is filled with people, and some do not look very friendly. It looks like almost all the students and staff have been subdued and are tied up lining the hallways of the 4th floor. Gags and ropes, and some are covered in a weird green goo that I've never seen before. This night just keeps getting better, doesn't it? I see a group of about 6 of them in long, dark robes, being led by a guy in skinny black jeans and a Christmas sweater. Wonderful. A gaggle of goofy wannabe cultists and a dorky Hans Gruber type. He even has the cutest little bit of facial hair, trying to look like Alan Rickman. Just as I'm sitting here giggling to myself, an icicle comes flying out of the darkness and impacts the wall behind my head and explodes into painful icy shards. Before I can even register the shock of the first impact, a flurry of ice spears comes flying at the desk and at me. I throw myself to the floor under the desk and hear more impacts. Oh, fuck me, I quietly whisper to myself as I can hear more hits. The desk is made of heavy wood, but it won't last forever, and I'll have to move. Time to go to work then. I peek around the corner and see if I can spot where the attacks are coming from. My eyesight adjusts to the lighting conditions, and I can see a small shape at the far end of the lobby, hiding behind one of those big, comfy chairs. I can't make out any distinct features, though, but I know they're alone. I can hear just one heartbeat besides my own, and it's beating so fast it's like a rapper's backing track. Hey, could you please stop throwing shit at me for like 5 seconds? I yell from behind the desk and prepare to sprint from my position. If I can distract them for just a moment, I can use that supernatural speed and close the gap and not catch an ice spear in the head. I mean, there is a reasonable chance I'd shrug it off due to my own gifts, but just because you're tough doesn't mean you're reckless. Another impact, and this time I can see the ice penetrate right beside my face. I know it's time to move. I thrust my body forward and move across the room in the blink of an eye, and at the last second I use the chair as a place to jump off and land behind it. Training kicks in, and I'm now in combat mode, and it all happens almost by instinct and sheer will alone. I sweep my leg low and knock my opponent over with tremendous force against the wall. Moving into close range, arms fly forward, and I throw all my strength into pinning their arms while pushing my weight onto them and holding them to the floor. Looking down at my opponent for a second, and I see it's a kid. She looks frightened and terrified beyond reason. She's an Asian girl who couldn't be more than 14, and that's maybe a stretch. She looks up at me in pure fear and closes her eyes, fully expecting me to end her, right here and right now. I'm not a monster. I try to tell myself that before I go to sleep at night. I put my hand over her mouth firmly. Look, kid, I think we got off on the wrong foot. If I let you go, will you tell me what the fuck is happening around here? She nods, and I can feel some, but not all, of the tension leave her body. I release some of the grip I have on her, and let go of my hold on her mouth. Who are you? She meekly asks. My name is Caroline, and I used to be a student here. I'm here to help. They killed Mr. Reeves. They killed Miss Simmons. They even killed Lunch Lady Maria. They turned the rest of the staff into monsters, the kid stammered out, then started to cry. Mr. Reeves was also known as Sammy Reeves. Sammy is dead, or at least according to her. I'll deal with this later, but right now, we've got bigger problems. I know how to fight monsters, terrorists, and about 7 different types of zombies, but I don't know how to deal with a kid crying. Okay, look, I'm also a federal agent, and I'm like you, but I figured you guessed that already. What do you mean, monsters? We sat down for a few minutes in the darkness and talked, and what I heard I didn't like. It seems about 2 days ago, things started getting weird, and then people started dying. She told me about strange creatures that tore the security teams apart, and they looked like something out of a horror movie. Green corpse-like monsters, covered in slime, and their touch that seemed to rot in an instant. Well, this definitely narrows it down. Rots. Servants of death gods. Corpses reanimated by the will of death and powered by the souls of the damned near where they are animated. Usually found in Europe, but more recently on modern battlefields. The unfortunate consequence of war, I'm afraid. Tougher than typical zombies, and had a pleasant side effect of a death touch that basically putrefied you. It's quick, but about one of the most unpleasant ways to die you can imagine. What's your name, kid? Anna Wu. They call me Slush. I'm not good with my powers. You're the first person I've ever successfully used them on. I chuckle at that. Well, to be fair, you didn't land a hit, Anna. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were one of Gary's goons, and I panicked. I'm guessing Gary is the asshole in the Christmas sweater. The others in the robes must be the rots under his control. Anna stopped crying and nodded. He killed my roommate, Sarah. She tried to stop him, but Gary's monsters... Her voice trailed off. I can guess that the rots touched her, and she likely died quickly, but painfully, being rotted from the inside out. God damn, I can't save everyone, but that is no way to die, especially for a kid. Is that how you got away? I didn't want to ask, but I had to know. She protected me while I ran away. I couldn't help her, so she told me to run and hide. Any idea why Gary is doing this? You don't just try to resurrect a death god on New Year's Eve 2012 unless you have a really good reason, or you're some nihilistic little fuck from Tumblr. No, but I know he talks to the dead. He transferred in a few weeks ago from out of the country. An exchange student from South America. I've got a few theories on why, and none of them good or even conclusive at this point. Could be anything from your typical I want to destroy the world twirly mustache to some kind of misguided religious belief, or, my personal favorite, crazy as a shithouse rat, as my dad used to say. All right, cool. So, I got, let me see, a crazy kid who can talk to the dead with about 6 rots under his sway, the resurrection of Yasu likely at hand, and hostages of all shapes and sizes. You know, some girls want to go out and have drinks on New Year's Eve, but instead I get dragged into Caroline and the Apocalypse. Not exactly Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve at Times Square, but I'm sure I'll find a way to bring a little life to this undead ghoul fest. Next year, I am definitely turning off text messages and going someplace sunny. Maybe Disney World. I want my mouse ears.
You're not safe yet. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
I glance at my watch. It's 11:48, and if I'm going to make a move, it has to be now. I'm wondering how useful my new friend Anna is going to be in a fight, especially if things get messy. Not like I have a choice. There's no time to call backup. If I don't solve this problem quickly, then the world won't be around for too much longer. So I need a plan and kick the door down, so to speak. Maybe really fast to kill myself and run the clock out on planet Earth. I can't just pull a Die Hard and expect to survive. I have to think tactically and less like a video game or a comic book. I need a plan B. Wait. Light bulb moment here. I head over to the front desk area and start looking at those camera monitors. We can take out this asshole by going into his blind spots. Yeah, we're gonna get this guy and we're gonna make goddamn sure he doesn't see us coming. There are 2 staircases with entrances up where Gary and his rots are, and only one of them is currently guarded. Looks like we have our blind spot, but how do we take advantage of it and move them away from the hostages? Well, maybe I can pull a Die Hard here. Hey Anna, I have a crazy idea, but I'll need your help. Tell me, do you have fine enough control of your abilities that you can super cool the air? The girl looked at me, confused for a moment, and seemed to think pretty hard for a second, but nodded at me. Yeah, it was one of the first things I learned to do. My parents didn't have an AC unit, so they'd ask me to do it, but more often than not, I'd freeze the house. Cute. A living air conditioning unit. Save a few bucks anywhere you can, right? If she doesn't become a superhero, then she'll be a blast at parties for cold drinks. Okay, maybe this will work after all. Looked at the monitors again, and it seemed like the hostages were relatively safe for the moment. The rots seemed to be guarding a door at the end of the main hallway, so likely the rec room on the 4th floor. Unfortunately, that is the one camera whose feed is currently dark, and I couldn't see anything beyond a sea of static. Fortunately, the front desk had the other component of my plan right there, smiling at me with a large yellow sticky note proclaiming, "Do not touch." The thermostat. Anna, so here's the game plan, and I can't do it without your help. I'm gonna have you super cool the air in the elevator, and I'm gonna fuck with the thermostat. Okay. Why? Science, motherfucker. Instant fog cloud that leaves cover for me to go in there and play Little Miss Badass. We're gonna put you in the top of the elevator where it's nice and safe, and you'll basically keep up the pressure and the cold. I could see the gears turning in Anna's head, and it clicked. Temperature difference, and with someone constantly running the fog machine, it was a perfect way to get an ambush going. Where will you be, Caroline? I'm going to be up the stairs, so when the attention is focused on the elevator doors opening, I can rush in behind them and hopefully clear the rots out before anyone knows what the fuck is happening. Looking at my watch and realizing the clock is starting to wind down, it's likely time to go. All right, 6 potential rots in cloaks, a dork who could talk to the dead, and a death god coming in hot for the new year. What's not to love? I mean, realistically, this could go totally sideways, and the Earth gets plunged into a new dark age under a menacing death deity who hates everything with a pulse. Or we go upstairs, kick some supernatural ass, and get back in time to watch the lame New Year's Eve shows hosted by Carson Daly or whoever the fuck is doing it now. If I end up saving the world tonight, I am getting that sandwich from the cafe before I leave, no matter what. I mess with the thermostat and set it in such a way that things should be downright uncomfortable upstairs in just a few minutes. It's go time. Anna and I walk up to the elevators, and I pry off the top of the ceiling and lift this little girl onto the top of the box. She makes herself as comfortable as she possibly can, but she looks scared shitless, and I don't blame her. This kid has already gone through a lot. And this is the kind of shit that fucks you up for life. Ghoul School always had a way with lasting memories. My scary memory was the death of Dan and Lori. Anna isn't even done with her first few semesters here, so I can only imagine what else is going to happen to her. I sincerely hope she'll have an easier time after tonight. This is heavy and frankly apocalyptic, but she's holding it together. Anna, hit this with as much cold as you can muster. Keep pumping out the cold and absolutely flood the place with fog or whatever. As soon as the elevator doors open, and no matter what you hear until I say all clear, keep it up. I know this is scary and probably isn't the best plan, but I think it's got a solid chance. Okay, Caroline, I got it. I won't let you down. We can stop Gary and help everyone, right? Yeah, I mean, it's either that or we all die horribly. I don't think Anna appreciated my dark sense of humor. No, we'll be fine, kid. I trust you have my back, and it's not like I haven't faced my fair share of weird shit. I winked at her and hit the button for the 4th floor. The doors slid shut, and I sprinted towards the stairwell that led to the upper floors.
More scares to come. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
Trying to be as sneaky as I could moving up the stairs, I didn't exactly wear the most appropriate footwear for an operation. However, sensible shoes be damned, I wanted to look hot. And cool. I also wanted to look cool. I knew this stairwell pretty well. I shared my first kiss with Lori in this place. She was so shy she trembled as I leaned in and kissed her. Okay, gotta get my head in the game. Slowly I squeaked the door open an inch so that I could see into the hallway and assess the situation. I could see probably 12 kids, all aged from 10 to probably close to 18 or so, huddled around the doors lining the hallway. Like an execution line. This Gary was going to execute them, and likely soon. I looked down at my wristwatch, and Minnie Mouse looked back at me and said 11:57 p.m. The smell from the rots wafted into my nostrils and assaulted it hard. Death has an unmistakable scent, and I've been around it too many times since I became an agent. Putrefied bodies and liquefied organs and so much worse. The rots didn't have much in the way of their faces left. Unfortunately, it was just scraps of flesh clinging to their skeletal remnants. The eyes were no longer human, but burning balls of green light that hated everything it saw before them. "It is almost time. All shall be sacrificed for the glory of Yasu!" A yell came from behind a closed door at the end of the hallway's common room. Don't need to think too hard on who that was. Gary. Screams and yells of resistance from girls and boys, the sound of primal fear that death was coming and nothing short of a miracle could intervene. The elevator doors opened. 4th floor. The air snapped cold in an instant, and ice started forming all over the surfaces like a blast of Arctic air. Moisture froze and hung in the air. Even taking a breath hurt, as my lungs started to freeze up. Anna was not fucking around. This girl had something to prove, and she wasn't going to let fear or doubt get in her way. She was here to save her friends. She was here to save me, too. Throwing the door open like I was smashing through a brick wall, it was time to face down the legions of the undead. No real weapons, but that's perfectly fine. I am a weapon. Reaching into that dark part of myself that comes from my mother's vampiric side and letting the blood in my veins boil over, all remnants of restraint are off. I am going to unleash all the hell and darkness that is embedded in my very essence. Vampire abilities aren't always the same from one to another. We get enhanced strength, speed, and durability, but sometimes other special powers slip through. We can grow wings, claws that cut through a bank vault, and a bloodlust that rivals berserkers of ancient legend. I am moving so fast that time virtually stands still, and I can fully assess the situation before me. The rots are absolutely caught off guard and slowly turn their deceased skulls towards me. Too late. Closing the distance between the stairwell door and the first rot, I strike. This abomination of flesh and bone was mine for the taking. I hit. Hard. Bone craters underneath my foot as I collapse its chest into paste. This meat puppet explodes in a shower of blood and tattered bits of skin, and worse. It flies against the next closest rot, and it knocks it to the floor before it can touch one of the hostages lined up along the hallway. The sheer force of the impact shattered its skull and fragmented it into thousands of pieces. The kids shrieked in panic, but held their position on the floor. 2 rots down, 4 to go. Adrenaline filled my veins, and something deeper from my supernatural side fueled my speed. Snapping my hands at my sides, my vampiric claws extended from my fingers almost 6 inches, supernaturally hardened and ready to take down whatever stood in my way. I've only used my claws a few times, but I know it can cut through military spec armor if necessary. One of the rots slapped me across the face with its skeletal hand. I felt parts of my skin burn and tingle with the infusion of necrotic energy. This rot had moved just as fast as me and was intent on killing me, so I couldn't interfere with its master's plans. I wasn't prepared for the hit, and it stunned me for just a moment. The taste of death filled my mouth. This is what the grave must feel like, as time itself eats your flesh. I instinctively grabbed at my face and the wound. I did it without even thinking. My vampiric ability would heal the wound shortly, but I could still die if I didn't get some distance. This was going to cost me my life. The rot was in my face and outreached its claws toward my throat. The first touch was a glancing blow. It wasn't enough to kill. If the undead creature managed to fully grab a hold of my windpipe, then it would use all of its death-fueled grasp to decay the very flesh from my body. I had no time to dodge or maneuver out of the way. It was way too close. I couldn't get enough room to swing my claws at it. Great. I'm going to die before I get a chance to even be assigned a proper field office. A high-powered gust of polar air rushed past the side of my face and knocked me forward and almost flat on my ass. I rolled into it as best I could and tried to regain some semblance of control. It wasn't pretty, but I caught myself before I was completely prone. Anna was right beside me, and her face was as unreadable as an Arctic glacier. Ice flowed from her outstretched hands in an ever-increasing frequency and tempo. The zombie-like creature that had wounded me was now coated in a thick, almost opaque sheet of ice. Unable to move from its frozen tomb, the creature fell to the floor and broke apart. This little powerhouse was done fucking around, and something deep within her had awakened. Anna was ready to throw down, and it seemed like she was going to fully embrace her gifts. I'd only really met her, and something had snapped in her. This was one of those moments that defines us here at Ghoul School. "You need to go. I've got this," the kid said with stern authority that I certainly didn't expect from her. The other rots had turned their attention towards Anna and seemed intent on her. A look of determination had set on the teenager's face. An aura of cold radiated off her, so intense that my eyes felt like they were going to freeze shut. The hallway filled with a blinding cloud of ice and snow, and you couldn't see more than a foot in front of your face. The kids screamed and the rots roared back in retaliation. I glanced at Anna, and she never stopped looking forward. "Caroline, go! Stop Gary! I'll handle this. Let me clear your path." This kid would be a great field agent when the time comes. Anna channeled whatever power she had and thrust her left hand forward in a dramatic gesture. The skeletal-like rots glared back at her and began to advance on our position in the hallway. A glowing sphere of blue energy crackled out from her outstretched hand. She closed her eyes, and a new look of concentration was on her face. The snowstorm in the hallway intensified, and wind whipped around us in a wild, howling storm. "Good luck, kid." I smiled at her and got myself ready to charge down the hallway. You could measure time in heartbeats for a moment. The 4 rots broke through the snowstorm and were right on top of us within seconds. This was it. The air completely changed, and for a second, it was as cold as the depths of outer space. It was like being hit in the face by liquid nitrogen. Cold doesn't even begin to describe it. I closed my eyes reflexively to protect myself. This really was it.
Are you afraid? Good. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
The hallway was dead quiet. No one and nothing moved. I was perceptive of my own heartbeat, and for a second, that was it. I was alone. No, wait. There were more heartbeats, frightened but definitely there. I opened my eyes and saw the once vibrant colored hallway looking like the aftermath of a blizzard. I don't know what I expected to see when I started looking around, but I was pleasantly surprised. The rots were frozen in place in front of us. The undead creatures were completely turned into solid ice and utterly transmuted into something completely harmless. I reached out and pushed one of them. The touch burned my skin from the temperature difference. But they were, for all intents and purposes, dead. Whatever force of malevolence powered their undead forms was completely annihilated. The rots were destroyed and turned into ice sculptures right before us. "Anna?" a boy's voice called out, and it seemed almost hopeful. Then a few more voices called out as the snowstorm dissipated into a light flurry. Good. The hostages, as far as I can tell, are unharmed except for maybe some frostbite. Anna can take care of them. We still, "Yasu, arise and come forth! Devour the unbelievers!" Then blood-curdling screaming, the snapping of bone and flesh, and something indescribable. Gary. I didn't even have time to register that I was flying down the hallway at breakneck speed. My body was rushing forward towards a brightly decorated common room door. I threw my full body weight at it and crashed through and splintered it into pieces as it exploded from the force. Assaulting my senses is the pungent odor of death once again, but also cinnamon. This kid, Gary, is doubled over in a darkened corner of the room and clutching his midsection. He raises his head at me and looks at me with pure daggers and hatred in his beady eyes. The Christmas sweater is drenched in an unfamiliar substance. I couldn't make out much of his form beyond the garish sweater, but what little I could see, I didn't like. This wasn't human anymore. "You dare enter Yasu's domain!" The voice wasn't the same one I had heard in the hallway. This was distorted, warped. This voice wasn't the pimple-faced dorky teenager named Gary. Yasu had arrived. This horrific blend of flesh and horror stood up to an impossible height as skin sloughed off of their form. Limbs extended to an unnatural length, and what little of Gary's face was left distorted into a mess of tentacles and eyeballs from impossible places. This was a cosmic horror given form right before me. 12 a.m. No time for witty banter, no time for a strategy. Just me and them, tooth and claw. Me and them. No, I had one more weapon in my back pocket. One thing my mom had said to me before I left for ghoul school. It was also the last time I ever saw my parents. "Honey, you're a monster, but you don't have to act like one. You choose what that means." Today, I chose violence. I am a monster, and you will remember my name. I do fucking dare. I flew at this hybrid of Gary and this avatar of the death god Yasu. I extended my claws once again and bared my vampire fangs. Deep inside, I started to let go of all that I had kept in check for what seemed like forever. Gifted and supernatural abilities, and whatever else I had was being unleashed with this flurry of blows. I didn't have time for this to end any other way than Yasu dying, here and now. We got entangled and grappled with each other. Yasu was still bound by some of the limitations of the physical body they were inhabiting. I could use that to my advantage. I'm stronger, faster, and whatever this thing is, it hasn't fully transitioned to its full godly form. It's still vulnerable, and I can stop it. I have to stop it. Claws sunk deep into the creature, and it let out a cry of unnatural pain. I kept slashing and clawing with all that I had in me. Fluid of some kind started oozing out of the wounds. Yasu had weapons of their own, and they dug into me and drew blood. The wounds were deep. The burning pain was unbearable. But I had little choice but to press on with my attack. "You will not stop me!" Yasu's grave voice rattled in my ears, but it wasn't as brave as it was even moments before. Yasu drove a clawed appendage into an open wound on my chest and twisted it like a knife. I yelped out, but still kept fighting back with all I could muster. The death god plunged another attack into me, but made one vital mistake. Yasu left an opening for me to exploit due to Gary's body. He may be taller, but he didn't have my body weight. I threw all my weight into my next follow-up hit and knocked them to the ground and left them momentarily stunned. They didn't think I had much left in the tank, and on one hand, they weren't wrong. I'm about to do something I never wanted to do.
Are you afraid? Good. Weekly Spooky will be right back.
I bared my fangs to their full length and bit down on the befouled neck of Yasu and started to bite. Draining the life from someone or something carries a heavy price that no one talks about outside of vampire circles. You take not just their life essence, but pieces of them, memories, fears, in a short piece of their soul, into your own. It's why a lot of vampires are crazy or are solitary loners. It drives you mad. It takes a toll that no mortal is prepared to deal with. Vampires like my mom were rare. She retained what made her human. I kept sucking blood and life from this horrific creature till it stopped twitching under me. I felt memories of Gary, abuse, bullying, and a lonely kid who saw his powers as a curse. I also had memories and pulses from Yasu, worship, prowess from untold places that gave power, and a bloodlust unlike anything I had ever experienced. After an eternity, it was over. Life had left the body, and it started to decompose before me. I shakily rose to my feet and watched the body melt into the carpeted floor of the common room. Within seconds, it was a puddle of fluids and bits of something I couldn't identify. The taste of blood lingered in my mouth. I don't know what happened next as the adrenaline left me and my claws disengaged and the energy in me dropped like a stone. I felt tears run down my face and all my emotions were all over the place. It was the resonance of the souls I had touched, mixed with my own. I had absorbed something alien. I had absorbed something beyond myself. I had taken lives before, but not like this. There was no bravado in this. There was something in this that felt different. I am different now, and I don't know what that means. I have to leave, but I've got to check on the kids and Anna to make sure things are okay. Am I going to be okay after all this? I could feel the edge of corruption from Gary and Yasu, but I pushed it down to the depths of my psyche to deal with at a later date. Still, a few things to wrap up before I can leave and also phone calls to make. Happy New Year, hey? The Department of Paranormal Resources came in and cleaned up the mess at the school. The feds sent the kids home until a more secure permanent residence could be assured. It won't take too long after all. Uncle Sam wants to keep a tight leash on his investments. I got chewed out by Director Carlson, but also congratulations on a job well done. I had managed to take down a significant paranormal threat without backup. I had lived up to the expectations of my training. I'm not sleeping particularly well after everything, but that's residual psychic resonance from Gary and Yasu. It should pass in a few more weeks, I hope. Carlson's team gave me a pass from the psychics, so I guess I'm good to go. My wounds have mostly healed, but I'll have a scar across my face from where the rot touched me. I think it makes me sexy in a weird way. The department has promoted me to a full agent, and I was to begin my new assignment in New York State before the end of February. I kept in touch with Anna via text. She was in good spirits after the incident. The kids she rescued looked at her in a whole new light now. They won't be calling her Slush anymore. She'll need a cool nickname or title when she graduates out of the program. I hope she has a better time than I did when I went through it all. I attended Sammy's funeral, but I didn't approach his parents or his partner, Franklin. It was a good service, but I kept to myself in the back. I put my hand on his casket and said my goodbyes, and then left as quietly as I came. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but the kids you helped teach will be the next strong batch of heroes and agents that I'll work alongside. I think that's a pretty powerful legacy, if Anna is any indication of things to come from that graduating class. I hope they give him a memorial like they did for Dan and Lori on school grounds. Everyone who died deserves to be remembered for something. It'll be time to pack up my apartment soon and make my way to New York and see what happens next. I know that girl I was supposed to have a date with, Rianne, lives in New York City, so I'll call her and see if we can take a swing at this. The life of a supernaturally empowered troubleshooter isn't boring, that's for sure. And you know, after all of this, after facing life and death and consuming the blood of some creature beyond all human comprehension of evil, I never did get that damn tuna sandwich either.
And that's the marathon, my spookies. 6 stories down and the clock still ticking, like it's got something to prove. If you're feeling that post-listen buzz, half adrenaline, half, why did I do this to myself? Well, good. That means you did New Year's Eve right. But don't wander too far, because on Wednesday, New Year's Eve, we're dropping a brand new story, and this one is the kind of chaos you only get when the year is about to roll over, and reality is already ready for bed. Let's just say it starts with a stupid perfect moment, summer heat, poolside boredom, hair metal blasting, and then the air tears, a little shimmer, a wrong vibration, and suddenly time isn't in a straight line anymore. It's a rip you can reach into. And once you realize you can touch the past, once you get greedy for one more conversation, one more chance, one more fix, New Year's Eve stops being a celebration and becomes the night the universe sends you a bill. So keep an eye on the Weekly Spooky feed, and if you catch a whiff of burning ozone, maybe don't step toward it.